But your story with your daughter is something unique. I've been following along on Facebook. So everybody, this is Amy Urbanovsky,
Hi.
super mom, and just amazing first lady of Buda.
Thank you.
Her husband is the mayor, and he does an amazing job. I can't even imagine what being the mayor of Buda is like. I'm sure there's some
just
challenges.
go to any of the Facebook pages about Buda, and you'll know.
Yeah.
Or next door. That's a fun one too.
Yeah,
where
next
people
door.
like to complain.
Yeah.
I see some of those things. I live in Kyle, but we have our own issues in Kyle.
Yeah.
But we have Amy on today because she's going to talk to us about her experience in education, as well as the issues that has been going on with her daughter Reagan with the PANS and PANDAS. And admittedly, I know nothing about it. I've done some research, and whenever I look at the stuff that I found online, it looks like Egyptian hieroglyphics to me. What I know is I've been watching her stories on Facebook and Reagan's progress, and it does look like she's doing a lot better. But I know it's been a challenge to get to this point, and so you speak freely as you want.
Okay.
I mean, I know there was a large number, quite a few misdiagnoses,
Right.
and were y'all scheduled to go to the Mayo Clinic at one point?
We did. We were scheduled to go to the Mayo Clinic the end of June last year. So when everything started in February 2nd was when kind of everything changed. After that first hospital stay and the first couple of doctor's appointments, what they were diagnosing her with and treatment plan just didn't sit well with me. And so I looked at Mayo Clinic and started asking questions on how do I get my child seen here. I just had a gut instinct that wasn't what they were telling me, just wasn't what was going on. And so I started sending medical records, and the more doctors we went to, I would continue sending things over. And then the way Mayo Clinic works is, here you have this specialist, you have this specialist, this specialist. They don't really communicate that great. At Mayo Clinic, it's like a team of doctors, and they all come together. At least that's my understanding. We ended up canceling those appointments and that trip because Reagan showed so much progress in the month of May. In hindsight, that was probably for the best, and I don't know this for a fact, but in talking with other PANS and PANDAS families, they didn't have luck at the Mayo Clinic in getting help for their child.
Wow.
So,
That's a little surprising to me, because everything we hear about the Mayo Clinic that's in Minnesota, right?
They have different
they have
locations.
different locations.
Yes. Yeah.
So how did this all start with Reagan? Was this just like overnight, or?
I mean, it was in a split second.
Wow.
I think it was a Friday night, and Lee was polishing her nails or doing something like helping her with her nails in our bathroom, maybe like around 9 o'clock at night. And all of a sudden she said she felt dizzy and lightheaded, like she couldn't breathe. And so we got her to our bed, and she sat down for a minute and kind of trying to get her to explain some of the symptoms, because it scared her. It scared me, but we want to stay calm. We don't want, because they can feed off of our energy. And so I just messaged the pediatrician with some of the symptoms, and she asked me some questions and said, I'm really not sure, but if this is okay and this is okay, this is okay, then I would just, watch her. If anything changes or if X, Y, or Z happens, then you need to take her to be seen. But she said, I don't think there's anything that the emergency room could do for y'all tonight. But come in to clinic tomorrow and see us, and we'll see what's going on. And so we had actually been to the pediatrician a few days earlier because Reagan had come home from school on a Monday with an illness, sore throat, headache, low-grade fever, gastrointestinal issues. And so I ended up taking her to the doctor, I think on Thursday, because she had missed that entire week of school. So we had just been to the doctor.
Right.
And they just said, oh, it's a virus. Give it some time, and it'll pass. And then it was Friday night that those symptoms came on. And then Saturday, we took her to their after-hours clinic, and they diagnosed her with a post-viral vertigo and said, try this, this should pass. It'll be fine. Then as the weekend went on, her mobility changed where she couldn't lift her feet up when she was walking. Like initially she was kind of wobbly where she could hold on to things. But she would just say, I cannot walk. I cannot stand up. And so we would have, again, I would take a video of her. So the videos that we took were because I couldn't explain it.
Right.
And so on Monday morning, I sent the pediatrician at like 7 o'clock in the morning a video of, I'm like, this is how she walked yesterday. Like, I'm concerned. She won't pick her feet up. She's shuffling her feet. And the pediatrician responded immediately, and she said, I've reached out to Dell Neurology. We want you to take her straight to the emergency room. They're expecting her. Just get there as soon as you can. And that kind of led us down the Dell rabbit hole.
Yeah.
I don't want to completely throw them under the bus, but I'm sure they have done wonderful things for different children, but I will not take my child there again.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah.
I mean, we took Lindsay there. Lindsay had a fracture on her growth plate.
Right.
From jumping off a couch, and they did a surgery there, and then she had surgery on her wrist. So our experience was but it was easier.
Right.
Because it was, fracture on a wrist and then her leg. I can't even imagine. So how was she feeling about all this? Was she,
I mean,
not being able to walk, and I'm 54, and that would kind of panic me a little bit.
Right. Initially, she trusted her pediatrician. It's been her pediatrician her whole life. And her pediatrician said, you're going to be okay. This is vertigo. Sometimes this happens after you get sick. Then we were in the hospital. They did an MRI. That was scary for her, because if you've ever had a brain MRI, they strap you in this kind of cage around your head and neck.
In a tube.
And so that was scary. I remember going in the room with her, and I told her I would stay in there the whole time, but I had to stand back. And I think the whole MRI was probably 45 minutes, and I'm just, standing for 45 minutes. And I prayed that entire time.
Yeah.
That whatever was causing it, that it could be treated and she could be healed from whatever it was. But she remained so positive and mostly joyful throughout the entire process. I mean, obviously she's going to have like worse days.
Right.
And those happened. But when we were in the thick of things, when she wasn't able to walk and when she had those like violent, I call them chorea movements. Hindsight, I think she had symptoms chorea, which can be caused from a strep infection. And in doing my research, a lot of those things overlap with PANS and PANDAS.
Okay.
Just to backtrack a little bit, PANDAS is an acronym in education. We know all about acronyms, and it stands for pediatric autoimmune neuropsychological disorder associated with strep.
Okay.
There's something else called PANS, which is pediatric autoimmune neurological syndrome. And that's kind of above PANDAS. And so PANS is associated with any kind of bacteria, virus, mold, Lyme, anything can trigger it. PANDAS is strep specific. So just to kind of backtrack, but she handled it great, like with bravery and grace. And we've talked about it. And the whole time I was like, we're going to get you better. Like, we're going to figure it out. And I would joke, I'm like, if we need to go across the world, like we will figure out, like, I promise you, we are going to figure this out. Like, you are going to get better. And I think in that whole process, she saw me cry maybe once or twice. Like, I was trying very hard, be like, you're going to be fine. It's going to be great. We're going to get through this. We're going to figure it out. We definitely started feeling the weight of it the longer it went by, and getting misdiagnosed and not feeling confident with the diagnosis. And then, she would see me trying to advocate for her, disagreeing with doctors, and kind of, that's kind of awkward and uncomfortable. And so it started weighing heavier on us as time went by, but she handled it like better than anybody else that I think could.
Well, I know whenever you would post on Facebook, and then you made a Facebook page for Reagan and what y'all were going through, I was always highly impressed that every time a picture of her was posted, even video of her walking and the struggles, always smiling, always smiling. That she's pretty resilient, and I mean, and think about it. Like, I know I go to the doctor. I hardly ever ask questions.
Right.
I hardly ever ask questions at all, and I think my parents are probably in the same boat. I think a lot of people, when we go to the doctor for our checkups, and we might be feeling a certain way, the doctor's like, "Do you have any other questions?" I'm like, "No." And even whenever I take the girls to the doctor, I mean, there would be times where I don't have any questions when I probably did.
Right.
So I mean, I can imagine standing up and advocating for your daughter and telling the doctor, well, I probably think you're wrong.
Right.
You're wrong. That's not what this seems to be. And
Yeah. So the first hospital stay, they basically said you had like vestibular neuralgia, if I'm saying that right, that there was her vestibular system was inflamed. The virus attacked her vestibular system, and it'll just take time, and go see an ENT. And then it was about a month later, her symptoms hadn't improved, and she went in for a brain and spine MRI and a lumbar puncture. She was sedated for that, and she just struggled coming out of sedation. Now we know that she's really sensitive to it, but to the extent that they just admitted us. So in that moment, I was like, okay, we're gonna use this to our favor, because we can see multiple specialists. Like, obviously, I don't want my kid admitted to the hospital, but it gave us an opportunity to get it in front of different sets of eyes for her. And then that's when everything just kind of spiraled. Like, I think within 24 hours, they had come up with what they thought the diagnosis was for her. I will share it, but I just think there are people that are misdiagnosed with this. It's called functional neurological disorder. They call it FND for short. And essentially, my understanding of it is just your brain and your body are not able to communicate. It's almost like you've had a traumatic brain injury, but it's not going to come up on testing, and nothing happened. It used to be called conversion disorder. They've kind of changed what it's called because it had such a negative connotation to it. And sometimes, I think more often than not, that disorder is linked with some kind of trauma. Not always, but I just remember them pulling us out of the room and taking us down the hall, Lee and I, to another room to explain it to us, what they thought she had. And I said, I don't think that's what this is. Like, I will listen to you, but I don't want to put all of our eggs in that basket. Like, I want to exhaust efforts everywhere else we can to be certain. And so basically the treatment for FND is overpriced psychiatric therapy with people that Dell recommends you go to, and they tell you, well, we send our patients here because they have experience with it. Insurance doesn't cover it. Physical therapy, but in some of the videos, watching her work through exercises, it's almost like they think they can beat it out of you, not literally. But the program that they recommended we send her to, because I wanted some kind of intensive physical therapy program, like somebody who had had a traumatic brain injury. Like, they have those inpatient at the hospital. But with this diagnosis, they don't offer that kind of treatment plan. And so when I was asking about it, I guess they misunderstood. But there is a program in Dallas that basically... And I have this in writing and email, because I was like, surely this isn't what they think would be best for my child. But you take them to, I think it was Dallas Children's Hospital. I could be wrong, but they have an F&D clinic there where we would go as a family. We would stay like the first day with her. Then we would tell her goodbye, and she would stay for 2 or 3 weeks. She would not have access to technology. She would only be allowed to contact us with a nurse present. Her only entertainment would be reading. My kid has dyslexia.
Why does it sound like a punishment?
That's exactly what it sounded like. There was no child life services. They would have a teacher to make sure they were doing all of the schoolwork, because they said they wanted to take away kind of the reward that children can get when they're suffering from an illness. Like, I have so much anger still about that.
I'm trying to wrap my head around the logic.
I am too. Like, I
mean, I can understand if there's an obsession with a device,
because I don't think
that needs to be limited.
You didn't post that. I don't think you posted
no.
it. I would have remembered that. That's
interesting.
And we joke that I have other words that I like to use for F&D. I have my own acronym.
Yeah. There's a lot of words I want to use.
Yes.
But there's no real treatment. That's their treatment.
So basically, the treatment is treat her like nothing is going on, put her back in school full time. Can you imagine sending her to middle school, walking like that? Take her to the treatment center in Dallas, do therapy, and basically hope for the best. Like, they couldn't tell me if that would help her recover. They just said the best chance she has at recovering. They said, don't give her walking aids. Don't give her a shower chair, nothing. And so we got to about April, and then we gave her the canes back because I didn't have another diagnosis. I had things that I thought were going on, and symptoms, chorea, and PANDAS were on my list of things that I'd specifically asked doctors about. And we were blown off. And so we had one physical therapy appointment with Dell, and I remember her therapist opening her laptop, going through Reagan's appointments, and she said, "Oh, I see Reagan had an appointment last week and she has another appointment this week." And I was like, "Yes." And she said, you understand her diagnosis, right? And I said, "I understand what Dell has diagnosed her with." And she said, continuing to take her to appointments is going to prevent her from getting better. And I even consulted with her pediatrician. Her pediatrician said, yes, you can't keep taking her to appointments and testing. This is a devastating diagnosis, but this is the way she's going to get better. And so that was the moment that I was like, we're done with Dell. We're going to figure, it was to the point where I felt like they were looking at me like I was doing harm to my child by taking her to different appointments. There were so many levels of stress and dysfunction during all of it. And so she continued physical therapy at Dell because there really wasn't a great place, and I didn't think it was going to hurt her. We would let her use canes because she was so isolated. At some point, you have to be able to get out of your house and be around people. And then we just started, would take her to any doctor that would see her. I mean, any doctor that was willing to see her. I mean, we did acupuncture, we did chiropractor, we did, and any doctor, any specialist that would see her while we could, but nobody associated with Dell. When we just continued therapy there. And then that overpriced psychiatrist, the F&D expert, I want to say it was $300 to $400 an hour.
Wow.
That insurance doesn't cover. And so my way of kind of bowing out of that gracefully is I just said, unfortunately, we can no longer afford, which was true. We can no longer afford to pay it. But I just didn't want anybody thinking that we were not following Dell's treatment plan for my daughter.
Some amazing parallels to Jamie's podcast. I don't know if you've gone and looked at any of the podcasts on this platform, but Jamie did a podcast with a lady. Who was that lady? But she does
Christine?
Yeah, Christine.
Homeopathy.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
mind blowing. I mean, it's things that you think, and then you hear, and then you hear this person talk about it. I've heard other people talk about it. I've heard people on Rogan's podcast and Sean Ryan's podcast saying the same things, that the healthcare industry and pharmaceutical companies are in almost like they're in cahoots together. And it's not about finding a solution, finding what's wrong, and finding a true solution. It's just like slapping Band-Aids on it. I wouldn't have taken, you're kinder than I am. If they suggested I leave my daughter somewhere for 2 weeks and I couldn't have contact with her, I'd be like, you know what you can do with that.
Right. Well,
especially up in Dallas, and I live down here. You're kidding me?
Yeah.
No.
And so what I've learned is they're just doctors that don't believe in PANS or PANDAS because they are taught in medical school, if you don't see it on a test on imaging, if it doesn't come up in lab work, it's fine. Like that's just, and so they don't know what they don't know, and that's part of the problem. We are very lucky that we found a team of very compassionate, think outside of the box doctors at Texas Children's. And I mean, it was 100% a God thing. Because when I scheduled her an appointment with an ENT, part of what was going on in the middle of this is she just had fluid behind her ear. Ear was popping.
Right.
She couldn't hear. Ear was hurting. And that had been going on a really long time. And so I basically just got on Texas Children's website and picked the first available appointment with an ENT. Didn't know anything about him. And he is the doctor that like changed everything for us.
And where was this at? This
Texas Children's.
in Houston?
Nope. They just opened a hospital up off Lake Creek Parkway up in Cedar Park.
Yeah.
The beginning of February.
Wow.
So kind of in the chaos of me not trusting the diagnosis they were giving us and not having full confidence in my pediatrician supporting what Dell was saying, I made an appointment at the Texas Children's Kyle pediatric location that's over near like Kohl's and Target.
Okay.
And I just went in and I told her, I'm here for a second opinion. Her pediatrician doesn't know we're here. I'm not confident in what they're saying. I don't want any medical records. I want a fresh set of eyes. She did her exam, super kind of compassionate. I remember she kind of got down and looked at Reagan and she was like, we're going to figure this out. You're going to be okay. And she sent a referral to neurology and she sent a referral to ENT, and that was mid-February. And so that was huge. And so those referrals were already sitting there just because of insurance and the whole process. So when we were able and ready to get those other opinions, we could just schedule.
Yeah. Wow. So, and you know as well as I do that, in this area, it's Dell Children's, and everybody, and again, my experience was good there, but you're not the only one that I've heard negative things about. I had no idea that Texas Children's had a clinic here, and that they'd opened up a location up on Lake Creek and Cedar Park.
Yeah.
Competition is good.
There's a new game in town,
Yeah.
and their
It
care.
sounds like they're way more empathetic.
Their care is like none other. Now, I will say, that after that second hospital stay, when it was like they wouldn't, basically I was like, we need to leave. They don't want us here. I remember having like a Zoom call with my pediatrician, and we had, I don't even remember the title of the person, but basically whoever the highest level person was at the hospital on shift at that particular time was there, the different attending and residents, and I don't know the hierarchy of the doctors. And then there was somebody else from the hospital like on Zoom, and then we had our pediatrician on FaceTime. And it was clear that they didn't want to hear our opinion. They didn't trust our parental instinct. Like, this is what they thought she had. And it was just, we were bumping heads. And so at that point, I was like, I just want to leave. They were ready to discharge her the next day. And there were some other like kind of details lost kind of in the middle of it that matter, but not like for the whole big picture. And so I just remember the day they discharged us, trying so hard to be encouraging and smiling, because when we got there, she couldn't walk on her own that week. When we left, she could, but not for long. And I mean, y'all saw the videos of how she was walking, exhausting. Just, I don't even understand how she had the stamina and the willpower to continue pushing through that. But I remember that was like our lowest of low. And, social media has some good perks to it. And one of it, I basically was like, I'll call who can get me in with neurology in Houston and Texas Children's. Like, who can help us out?
Yeah, I remember.
And we had a friend that was able to get us in with like in 48 hours. And so we went there. We made the trip there and back in one day. I mean, I don't know why dates stick out to me, but March 8th is sticking out. Like, that's the day we went. And he diagnosed her. He said aphasia, but it was FND. It's just a motor disorder. I don't even know.
Similar to FND, I guess.
Yes, it falls under FND, but I think he already knew our knee-jerk reaction to that diagnosis. So when it's like he met with us for like an hour. And he seemed wonderful and brilliant. Like he is the head of I don't know the right word, but like motor development. Like he is the motor guy to see. And he got it wrong, and that's okay now. I mean,
Right.
it's not okay, but you only know what you know. And what I've learned out of all of the specialists and seeing her, neurologists are the worst, and they know the least about it, which is crazy to me because it affects their brain.
Right.
And so because that doctor thought she had FND, basically he was with us for an hour. He stepped out for 20 minutes. In my mind, I think he called his Dell neurology buddy that he plays golf with, been like, hey, can you look up this? What do you know? And then he came in and like doubled down on the diagnosis.
Wow.
And since then, I've tried to get that diagnosis removed from her medical chart because I don't want her looked through a lens of a mental health disorder, because that's...
You don't want to prejudging.
Right. And I feel like if you see that on somebody's chart, and it was New Year's Eve this year, Leah and I took her to another Dell neurologist. I mean, not Dell, sorry, Texas Children's neurologist. And basically we were there to discuss our disagreement and the diagnosis and me wanting to get that diagnosis removed. And it was an hour of intense back and forth conversation. And, he was trying to quote studies and literature and support his colleague. And I said, I understand that's your colleague. But if you can show me a study, an FND study, where a child has chorea movements and can't walk, gets a tonsillectomy, and the next morning the chorea movements are gone. If you can show me the FND study that shows tonsillectomy is a treatment for it, I'm all about it.
Right.
And he tried to say, well, I can't do that. And I said, then how can you explain it? And he said the placebo effect. And I was like, absolutely not.
The placebo effect.
At one point, and I think just being more of a petite female in the medical realm, I feel like doctors aren't used to you being more strong and outspoken. And so within 15 minutes of the appointment, I remember him saying, like, I feel like you're being really aggressive. Like, I'm not comfortable with this. And I was like, my husband and my daughter were there. I'm like, I don't think I'm being aggressive. I want this diagnosis removed. And so we're still kind of fighting with Texas Children's with that, because the neurologist is the one that needs to take it off.
That guy needs to take it off.
The original doctor. And I've sent him emails and he hasn't responded. And
of course not.
Yes. And so it is a problem in neurology. There are not many neurologists that are believers in PANS and PANDAS.
Why do you think that is? Like, it's there. I mean, we can look it up on the interweb.
Right.
We can look it up and we can see all this stuff. And there are, there's so much out there on the web about this and it's all says the same thing. So why do you think neurologists are so adverse to or don't even know about it?
Because if they can't see it on an imaging report and they can't see it in labs, it's not a problem. That's my opinion. The neurologists we have seen are only as good as what the radiology report and the lab tests come back as. And so with PANDAS, it's autoimmune encephalitis, which is, and she has that on her chart now. So if we were to ever go somewhere and she had an emergency, we can say she has a history of autoimmune encephalitis. The difference is autoimmune encephalitis will come up typically in lab work or in like spinal fluid, and it doesn't show up in PANS and PANDAS because PANS and PANDAS affects the basal ganglia portion of your brain, and that controls emotion and motor development. I think part of the reason that she was harder to diagnose with this is because you could have 200 kids lined up with PANDAS, and none of the 200 are going to have the exact same symptoms.
Wow.
None of them. A lot of children.
But there's a lot of overlapping symptoms, I guess, or they wouldn't all be lumped together in that.
Yes, I think there are overlapping symptoms, but a lot of children present with aggression and anger and severe depression. And Reagan didn't have that. Now, she developed severe OCD, which I didn't recognize at the time. I just thought she can't control anything else. So if she wants to eat the same food every day for a month, all for it. If she wants to watch the same, we joked it was Dance Moms. If she wants to watch Dance Moms and that be on the TV 24/7 for a month or two, like, control what you can control. Like, she needed a little bit of control is what I thought. Hindsight, I know that wasn't the case, because as she got better, those obsessive compulsive characteristics and behaviors transitioned into other areas. Okay. But because we were so focused on the Korea movements and the not walking, and like her eyes were dilated forever. He couldn't, and that was another thing we asked the neurologist, explain to me why her eyes are dilated all the time. He couldn't explain that. So we were so focused on the more obvious symptoms that OCD piece didn't come into play. But kids can develop tics, motor abnormalities, depression, anxiety, panic.
Well, I know she had some instances back in the fall with school, because you posted about it. My heart was breaking. I mean, I love kids, and working around teenagers. I have kids in my class. Imagine, I mean, my students don't have this, but they're AP kids. They're so wound up about their grades. And then you start talking about how we're going to do a lot of writing in here, and the panic sets in. So I remember seeing, some of your posts about, pulling up to school.
She had never had panic attacks before. And I'll say she really enjoyed school up until this. Now, she didn't love 6th grade, but I mean, she only went for a semester in the fall in 6th grade. And that fall, she had some kind of gastrointestinal something that landed her in the hospital. She had the flu. And so she had already missed. Like, it was just it was already 6th grade's a hard transition.
Yeah, it is.
But she wasn't off to a great start. And so I think part of the panic attack, it was the way she explained it. So we have a rheumatologist in Austin, and forgive me if I'm bouncing around. If I need to connect the dots, let me know. That treats her for PANS and PANDAS now, because it's an autoimmune condition. And what I was told was the guy for PANS and PANDAS, the doctor, is out of Texas Children's in Houston, and he's rheumatology. So they are kind of tag teaming her treatment. Like, our rheumatologist is wonderful, but he has more expertise with PANS and PANDAS, so she consults with him. And when she needed, we needed to pursue IVIG infusions, he was helping with her to advocate with insurance. And so we will have virtual appointments with him. It was like every 6 weeks. And so we were talking about that panic and that anxiety piece. And a lot of kids, they just want to immediately put them on an anxiety medication. And she just already had other things going on neurologically. And full disclosure, like, I've had anxiety and I've taken anxiety medication. So I wasn't anti-medication. I just needed to make sure, like, we've exhausted all the other efforts. And then what's the timeline? Like, this isn't going to be for everything. Explain to me how this is going to help her, and then how we're going to come off of it. But basically, when he was talking to her about the panic attacks and what was happening, she said, it's like there's this cute little kitten running up to me for me to pet it, but I feel like it's a lion. My brain and my body thinks it's a lion. And I was like, that's perfect. Like, I mean, she has just found ways to explain and simplify things. And so she is aware, and was aware, that she wasn't in danger. Like, we could talk through it, but her nervous system, you couldn't calm it down. And so, again, in hindsight, I think putting her back into school before her body was fully healed wasn't in her best interest, but we made a lot of decisions based on the progress she made in May, and we didn't know kind of the road ahead of us. And it was just so much. I mean, with the kid, she already has learning disabilities, so school is already hard.
It's already difficult.
And so to already be a child that learns outside of the box, which if we go back to talking about education, I'll get on that soapbox, that is not physically healthy, and it's affecting her mental state of mind. And she missed the second half of 6th grade. And then she's missing multiple days a week for doctor's appointments, but she's expected to like keep up the pace with, and you know, they were great and they would work with her. We had an ARD right before school started in 7th grade to like make sure she wasn't being loaded down with busy work, that if she was missing school, like for infusions or whatever, that it was going to be work that was like a STAR tested concept or something that she hadn't demonstrated mastery of. If it was a concept she'd already demonstrated mastery of, they would just check off good and then move on. And I think it was just her body wasn't healed, and we were all so ready, herself included, for her to be better, that we just jumped in, and it was just too much too soon.
So she has an IEP.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for those that don't know what an IEP is, that's an individual education plan that students that have more learning difficulties get after we have an ARD. We're teachers and staff members, and there's always an administrator and usually one of the counselors, and then the district representative that's in charge of that department or in that department. We sit down and we come up with a plan to determine what's going to be the best course of action to help this student be successful. Sometimes it's extra time for assignments, no penalty for turning stuff in late,
They can have inclusion support where they've got like a push-in extra teacher or para to help them.
And they're extremely beneficial, and you had the benefit of being a teacher, so you know how these plans can work. I know a lot of parents, and I know I guess it was maybe last spring or maybe in the fall, you were part of a group here in Hayes for special ed on a Facebook group. Was that right?
Yes, special education parents.
Because a lot of parents don't know their rights.
Right.
And they don't realize that those documents are
legally binding.
And they are federal law. There's federal documents, and teachers are required by federal law to follow these IEPs. And if they don't, you can lose your teaching credentials 100%. And I don't know what your experience is at the elementary level, but I know at the secondary level, there are teachers throughout this entire state every single day that the school year is going on that ignore students' IEPs. And even to a certain extent, ignore their 504 accommodations.
I think the 504s were ignored much more because there's not as much teeth in those.
Yeah, there's not a lot of teeth. But for IEPs, and if you're a parent that doesn't know your rights, man, and you just sit there and you listen, and we see it a lot. That sounds good. That sounds good. And it's like going to the doctor. You don't know to advocate for yourself.
Who should they contact if they don't know their rights and they see
this
episode?
And I don't know if you know about these. They should contact advocates. There are advocates, special ed advocates, because I work with a person. Her and her husband work at my school, and they have an advocate for their son and their daughter, and then that advocate's in that meeting, and it's like no.
And the committee is not going to love that you're showing up with an advocate.
No, they won't. They absolutely. You are 100% right. When you bring an advocate in that meeting, which is your right as a parent, and when you bring an advocate in there, the advocate knows the laws. They are well versed and educated on the laws. When you bring in an advocate, man, the hair on their neck will stand up a little bit, and they get nervous.
And I think so. And I will say, so if you're a parent of a student with an IEP that you don't know your rights, then that's a whole nother situation. But if you are a parent of a student receiving special education services and you do know the laws and you do know your rights and you advocate for your child, that's an uphill battle too.
It is. It's 100% an uphill battle.
And so that that makes things complicated. She had a 504 up until 5th grade.
Yeah.
She was tested in 3rd grade, and it was everything was kind of blamed on the COVID slide. And so she didn't qualify. But then in 5th grade, I pushed for her to be tested. Nobody else thought she needed to be tested, and then she ended up qualifying. But part of it was her 504 wasn't followed. And so that created a difficult environment to be at a school that you love to work at and love to teach with, but then you're advocating for your child for the 504 to be followed. Like, you don't make friends when you're advocating for your kid.
No, you don't. And at the end of the day, I mean, it's the same thing at the secondary
kids are
level.
the one that suffer during all this.
Yeah.
Yes.
All this.
And I'm fine.
Adult acting like children.
And I'm fine to be known as the parent that's going to advocate for her child. Like, that's fine, because there are a lot of people in the world that I can be friends with.
Right.
But I'd say that I would advocate for her in any setting like I would for any other child. And so
Right.
a lot of times in my classroom, I would get some of those kids that didn't quite fit in the box, because I think, being a teacher, you're taught all of these things and strategies and tools, and you're taught laws and accommodations and strategies and how to reach these kids. Then you have your teachers with the special education certification, and they're angels. I went back later and got my special education certification a couple years ago. But I think it's not unless you have a child that has an IEP, it just gives you a different perspective. And it's not that I wouldn't follow any child's IEP prior. It just gives you, I guess, some empathy. And I think there are teachers out there that think they are strong enough teachers that they can just teach it out of them.
Yeah.
Like that mom thinks, but their kid's fine. And if mom would just stop and let this, like, they'll be fine. And so that's definitely an area that I think needs to change.
As a school districts don't do a good enough job in training teachers how to understanding the importance of SPED. I don't know how they do it here. I know in my district, it's like a half-day PD at the beginning of the school year.
And I don't want to get on the bash teacher bandwagon, because there's amazing teachers and there's teachers that might need to find a different profession. But it's a support, it's a funding, I mean, it unfortunately all comes down to money. And I would think anybody that gets into teaching for the heart of teaching, that's there for the right reason, if they had the proper support, though, they wouldn't miss those details, I would hope. Now, again, there's always going to be those people. I don't know why you would want to teach if you don't love children and don't want to help children. Something that I love, that I learned from Kathy, that I think about all the time now, is, you have all these hoops and things you have to jump through as an administrator, as a teacher, and sometimes it just doesn't make sense. It's not. Yeah. It doesn't seem right. And so what I would try to do, and again, I would make mistakes all the time. Not a perfect person at all. But it's like, is this what's best for kids?
For kids.
Is this what's best for this kid? Is this what's best for that kid? And I feel like in education, if when every decision, every policy, everything that's being put in place, if you have people who are passionate about children and who love children and want to help them grow, if that's the question they have to ask and the answer is anything but yes, then it's scrapped.
Yeah, and Kathy's always been that's been her big deal.
Yeah.
If you're doing what's best for kids, then I have no reason to talk to you.
Right.
And just to touch on that for a little bit, she had a really good mentor in her mom. Sandra was an administrator in CCISD, and so that was her example.
Right.
And Sandra was very much like that, because I remember, when we were married, we would talk shop.
Yeah.
And Sandra was a big proponent of, just as long as you're doing what's best for kids, and if you're doing what's best for this kid but not this kid, you're not doing it right.
Right.
And Kathy was that kind of principle, and and it shows in Elm Grove the way it was ran by her when she oversaw it with the Leader in Me program and the things that happened at that school. And I know my girls, I'm a little biased because my girls went to school there, and I'm firm believer that and Kathy is an amazing principal. And there are some people out there that would disagree with me on that, and that's fine. I mean, I know her very well.
Not everybody has to like everybody.
Yeah, not everybody has to like everybody, but she's a huge advocate for you just do what's best for kids, and those are hard to find.
Right.
We had an interim principal this past year that I'd worked with at Elgin, and Cheryl Corey, she's pro kid. She's a kids principal, and she's a teacher principal. And as long as you're doing what's best for kids,
Right.
then she has no reason to come and talk to you and hang out in your room. Make sure you're following procedures and doing what you're supposed to do. And and that kind of leads me to this question. Whenever all this stuff was going on, I know Reagan was missing a lot of school. Where she was going to school at, how was that received with her absences and everything, and how accommodating was that school? I'm not going to mention the school.
It's fine. I mean, I'm sometimes an over communicator to a fault, and I'm trying to learn from that.
I don't see it.
As a high school teacher, I'm going to tell you right now, there's no such thing as over communication from parents.
So
communicate a lot, please.
So, in my naive mind, that first, as far as in the medical situation, I was very naive going into this. I mean, it was the second or third night Reagan was at the hospital, and so I remember calling Kathy to say, I don't know how long this is going to be going on, but I'm not going to be able to come into work. And then I remember her talking about like family medical leave, and I was like, I'm not going to need that. And then I remember talking to her pediatrician. It was like all the same night. And the pediatrician said, we need to get the homebound forms. This was before the F&D diagnosis. So this was February. F&D didn't come till March. And I was like, really? And she's like, you need to get the ball rolling on that. It's really hard to qualify for, but it takes a long time and you need to get it. And so we got the ball rolling on both things pretty quick. And again, I think it's just everything felt so out of control. So anything that I could control, kind of with Reagan, like what I was thinking was going on with her, that was the OCD symptoms. Those were tangible things that I could do that I felt like was helping. And so we got that ball rolling pretty quick. And then she qualified for homebound school. Yeah. And so we had this amazing lady that would come over 2 days a week. And we absolutely adore her because she came in when we didn't know what was going on. And she saw us at our most broken, lowest place. And she had a front row seat into our home. And it's hard to let people in your home, especially when you go through something like that. And I just have so much love for her. But she came in and she would do 2 days a week, 2 hours a day with Reagan. And honestly, I didn't care about academics. I need her to learn, but like I need her to walk. If she can't walk, I don't care if she can do algebra. Like we've got to get her walking first. But
was this an employee at the district?
Yes. So it was a teacher. It's a Johnson High School teacher. She is amazing. And she was special education certified. So
James, in case you didn't know, when districts offer homebound services, it does take a while for that paperwork to process. I don't know why. It just does. But when they do that, they typically have a group of teachers that have gone through the training to be homebound teachers. And so they have the regular classes, and then when school day's over, for those 2 days a week, they go and they visit the student or students in the evening.
Wow.
And
I didn't know that.
Well, and they get extra pay, but it's not a lot.
Right.
It's
Well, they
like
also get
it's
extra
definitely
training in extra
it's
school.
definitely a calling.
it's a calling because you're giving up your time outside of school, the regular contracted hours,
Right.
and for what it does for those students, it gives them a connection back to school, but also provides a sense of normalcy.
Right.
And I don't know if that's what happened with Reagan, but
yes, I mean I mean for her sometimes it was another, like our mind was so not on school but also on school, so it was nice to have somebody to come in that was like focused on that. And
it was a high school teacher, by the way. Just saying.
Algebra teacher, special education. I was like, you can't retire until my child gets through freshman algebra. But I remember, I guess I don't remember if she sent it in text or if she said it. But sometimes, at least when what I was going through, it was nothing compared to what Reagan was going through, but just the hours. Like Lee would even say, like, when are you, you're not sleeping? So I would send him links to medical journal articles all night long. It's like, when are you sleeping? When are you eating? And I'm like, I'm fine. Like, I'm dealing with things in the way that I can deal with them.
Mm-hmm.
But I would spend that 2-hour chunk when she was working with Reagan, following up on appointments, trying to schedule appointments, trying to get results from tests, trying to find new. I mean, I was usually like on the phone, going back and forth or arguing with insurance. And so she made a comment to me that she saw that. She's like, every minute I was there, even though you weren't doing anything with Reagan, you were advocating.
You were doing
for
things
Reagan.
for Reagan.
Yeah.
And it was just like, you know, I mean, obviously,
And you were
I love
still
my job.
teaching at this time, right?
Well,
were you still
I
on
had
staff?
FMLA.
Oh, you had FMLA.
Yeah.
Were you having to do stuff for your class, like sending
No.
lessons? They didn't.
No, because apparently, like, you're not even supposed to talk
Yeah.
to your team
On
legally.
on FMLA,
Mm-hmm.
when you're out from family medical leave, you are not supposed to do anything with your job, because we had an administrator that
grid?
was out. Yeah, that's a big no-no.
And
It's
at
a
first,
huge no-no.
You know,
And it's hard when you're used to being in the grind.
right.
It's hard to distance yourself from that. But literally in the paperwork you fill out, and when it's approved, they tell you you don't answer emails, you don't answer phone calls, you don't grade a paper, and you would be shocked at the number. You would be shocked at the number of teachers that do lesson plans and will grade and enter grades in violation, and they could have that revoked.
No,
Just because they have a control issue and they can't let anybody else do it.
No,
for them?
teachers feel an obligation. Like I don't.
it's
hardly,
hard. I
it's-
mean,
it's
I
hard.
still feel guilty
Yeah,
and sad that I
don't
didn't get to
like-
finish the year.
You know how
with
many
those
days I
kids.
took off this year? At a 187-day contract, I took off 1 day. I took 1 day off. And even after I gave the AP test, my kids took the AP test, I was there every day. We were watching, Bourdain.
Mhm.
And I wanted to be around my kids.
Yeah.
Because they finally figured out that, I'm not the Bruce and Brody guy that they thought I was. I mean,
Like, actually, he's pretty cool.
yeah, but we do. I mean, I remember when I was coaching, if I had to take off for a tournament or stuff like that, I enjoyed being out of the classroom. But in the back of my head, I wonder what those guys are doing, what those clowns
Yeah.
are doing. Are they doing the work? Or they have questions? And even now, like, guys, if you have questions about an assignment, email me. It's like we're constantly on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And at the high school level,
Yeah.
especially. And I don't know how your son's experience has been with Johnson. I do know, with Lindsay, when she was there, she had a difficult time contacting teachers because they wouldn't email them back. And I don't understand that. Like, I email my kids back with, usually right away, and they're shocked because their experience has been that when teachers don't care, and that's what they equate it with.
Yeah.
And to
Or they don't want to bother them.
Yeah, they don't want to bother them. And I get that. Hey, Coach, I hate to bother you over the weekend. I told you to email me if you have a question.
Yeah.
So let me look at your assignment.
Yeah.
I'll be out with friends.
Yeah.
Like, I've literally been at a winery with Crystal and Jacob, or at Devil's Backbone or something. And I'll pull up they're like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm helping a kid. Leave me alone. And I get on my Google Classroom, and I pull up their assignment, and I will sit there, and I will make comments on their paper. And we've talked about it before. When you do that with high school kids, man,
Right.
you got
Makes
them.
a big impression.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you're carrying a lot more than some of their parents do.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were in Concan this weekend.
Yeah.
Over
It was
Joe
her birthday.
Jimmy's.
Yeah.
And Reagan looked like she had a blast.
Yeah. It was a good time. We let her bring a friend.
Yeah,
Um,
she looks like, the what I've noticed, and I pay attention to kids and pick up on when they're not in a good in a good headspace or whatever. Just her smile.
Yeah.
In your videos. So in case you didn't know, Reagan dances and is actually really good at it. And to see the video of her performance recently, I know that had to make you and Lee super, super happy, because, I mean, to get to this point, did you ever think you would be back at this point? Or they would be back this quick?
I mean, it took yes and no. I don't know that I said this to Reagan, but what I said to Lee was,
And she's worked hard.
Oh, yes. I mean, she has worked really hard. But what I would tell Lee was, I'm going to find doctors that can get her better, or I'm going to die trying. I'm not going to stop. And so.
Yeah, that's what parents do.
Right. And I think any parent would do that for their child. But when I would talk to her kind of in the midst of it, you ask how she was kind of going through things, to circle back to that, I took her to a counselor, and the counselor, not the overpriced F&D psychiatrist,
just like a regular counselor,
right? And she's like, she does not seem stressed. I was like, what? She's like, she doesn't, like, she's fine. And if she was sitting down, you wouldn't know anything was going on with her,
right,
except for her eyes were dilated, or if she stood up. If she tried to stand up or walk, but if she could ground herself on something, she wouldn't shake.
right.
And so it was just such a confusing, just all of it was so confusing. And so that was part of why I was videoing, to send videos to other doctors and to show other doctors. Like, when you only have a short amount of time, it's hard to explain all the things. And then, we had friends that just weren't sure, and people speculate, and there's more wonderful people than not. But we just got to a point where Reagan was getting questions and we were getting questions, and we didn't know how. It's like, you can't answer it. You don't know it until you see it. And her and I had the conversation about sharing it. Mm-hmm. And she said, I'm okay with it. And so it was a very gradual thing. But what I think it did for us, and why I continue to document things, is she'll say she doesn't want to talk about it. Anytime I try to bring up something, or like, I've connected with other parents of children who are going through this battle, who are fighting misdiagnoses, that they think their child has PANDAS or PANDAS, and they're trying to get treatment. And so other parents reached out to me and helped us on our journey. So I have other, like, new families that are reaching out for me to pay it forward to them. Right. And there was this mom, I don't even know her name. I don't remember where they live. It was a Facebook message. And basically her daughter looked like Reagan's videos, and that's where she made the correlation. And she wasn't able to walk, and she was getting blown off. She was about to bring her child to Dell for an F&D diagnosis. And I was like, I can't.
So they're local. Like
they weren't in Austin. I know they were driving in for it.
Okay.
And then she asked me just some other questions about PANDAS, or I was telling her about PANDAS and PANDAS. I'm like, I would really explore this and go to this website. I'm not a doctor. I can just speak on my experience with my daughter, but here's some information. And like 2 weeks later, she sent me a video of her child running. And so, when I tried to share that with Reagan, because I think part of the healing process for her, I think she's in a different place than I am with that. But then I was like, Reagan, like, there's purpose. Like, look, your story and you being willing to share your story. And that's just one of several people that we have connected with and communicated with. I mean, even today, a mom brought her children from Dallas to see our rheumatologist, because we met at the Capitol on October 9th. And she was going back and forth and trying to find the right treatment. So she was messaging me yesterday. She was nervous about, I guess they got in town yesterday. And she messaged me. She's like, your doctor is amazing. She's wonderful. And she helped us in like all of these things. And so when I try to share that with Reagan, she's just kind of like, she doesn't want to talk about it. But I think, and her making some of the videos, and with me sitting down with her, me making some of the videos, it's healing for us, because to see the progress she's made. Like, when we get in hard moments now, it's not that you forget, it's just you don't remember what it was like to sit in that moment and that feeling. And so I think the videos and kind of documenting things for her and me is therapeutic in healing for us, because we can see where she was and how far she's come. When she or I feel like she's missing a milestone or missing a mark or still behind, where she should be, looking back at those videos helps us, like, gets our attention, and like, okay,
to see how far she's come.
Right. And that's really why we focus, like, comparing. She doesn't compare herself with other people. She compares herself with her. But like, as a parent, you're like, you don't want your child behind, and then high school's coming and all the things. And I get wrapped up in that mindset. That's not healthy. That's a whole nother podcast.
That's a whole other thing. And
yes.
How many kids does this affect nationwide?
1 in 200 kids have it in Texas.
Wow.
is the latest statistics that I received.
0.5%, is that for PANS? And then
For
PANDAS
PANS and
was
PANDAS,
1 to 2%?
they're interchangeable. PANDAS is just associated with strep. And so, yeah. And so the reason they didn't think she had PANDAS, the pediatrician, and I've since said I need to meet with her because we've left that practice, but I've never really gone back and followed up with her,
Right.
is because she had a negative strep test. So because when we took her in, like the few days before with her
Right.
illness, I thought she had strep because those were the symptoms that she had when she had strep. But her rapid test came back normal, and the one they sent off came back normal. So that was completely off the radar. What's important for doctors and families to know is that your child can have PANDAS. Like, you can have a strep infection somewhere in your body that cannot be detected by swabbing your throat.
No, I didn't know that.
There's labs that can be done, I forget what they're called, that can look to see if you have a current or recent strep infection. And so we know now that's what she had. And there could have been other things contributing, but when they took out her tonsils and adenoids, they sent the tissues off. They biopsied them to test them for all the things, and they came back full of strep, like her adenoids and everything. And her blood test showed that she had that infection kind of brewing in her body. And so it's an education thing. Doctors are behind the curve, or they're so programmed. And
is it being diagnosed more often because it's being more understood, or are there just more cases of it being
I mean,
found?
I can only speak to what, like, I learned at the Capitol and what I've read. And so I don't know if it's being diagnosed often. I think it's being missed in a lot more kids than it's being caught. I mean,
they're not testing for it?
Right. They don't even consider it. Like, I would love to ask my pediatrician, and this will probably have, or her previous pediatrician, how many children have you diagnosed with PANS and PANDAS? I'm just, would be curious. And that was one of the questions I had with the neurologist, the last one that we saw with Texas Children's. And again, we love Texas Children's, but neurologists are not PANS and PANDAS knowledgeable, which, again, I completely don't understand because they study the brain. But I asked him, how many hours of medical school of training did you receive on PANS and PANDAS? And that's when he thought I was being aggressive.
Condescending.
Yeah.
And my point was, just because you didn't learn about it or you're not an expert in it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Right.
And I think it's, wasn't that how rheumatic fever was originally? Like, strep affected their heart, but for the longest time, they didn't make the connection. And then now it's a known thing. I think that's how this might be. And that neurologist at Texas Children's, despite a very uncomfortable and hard conversation, he did say, you're doing what you think is best for your child. Keep doing that. Like, you might be paving the way to make this process easier for people 10, 15, 20 years down the road. And so I think it's just, they don't know, they're not taught. It's a gray area. And if it doesn't fit in a box, just like in education, if kids don't fit in a box, just in medicine, if they can't mark off these things, if they can't fit it in a box, it's anxiety, or it's FND, or it's,
Well, and it takes people being willing to think outside that box,
Right.
and take a step outside the norm. And I'm not saying I'm definitely not like that to a certain extent, but trying something different.
right.
And and again, the whole, it's the way we've always looked at it, the way we've always done it, or like this, like the most dangerous comments, most dangerous phrase in anything, in any business, in any classroom, in any medical office. I mean, I'll be honest with you, for a long time, I didn't want to go to doctors. I cannot stand going to the doctor's office, and I had the consequences of that with my kidney stuff, and I should have been going, and it's not that I distrust them, it's,
I do.
well, I mean, for me, like, I know history and I know education, but you get in there and start talking about globuloids and all this other
Right.
all this other stuff that goes on your body. I'm like, okay. You say I need to take this blood pressure medicine for the rest of my life? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, because I have hypertension genetic. Thanks,
Yeah.
Dad. And so I got to take these pills. Okay. So what happens if I don't? Well, then your kidneys will probably shut down. You have to have a transplant. Okay. Well, give me all the pills, and I don't know what to ask. And
Right.
it takes people apparently the person y'all found that identified this,
Yes.
and that started this trajectory to where she is today.
And he explained, and he didn't go into detail, but he said basically somewhere in his past he had like a rare medical something, because he was very cautious.
Oh, he himself?
The doctor that diagnosed it. And so he was like, we didn't walk in his office and he's like, well, she has PANDAS. He watched her walk, he watched her stand, he took the history. I told him.
Did they do a SPECT scan on her brain?
No.
Oh, that would be interesting to see.
Does that expose him to radiation?
I don't think so.
Is that the one that shows like different areas of the brain and
different colors and the neural pathways being broken?
Okay, so she had
for brain injuries and addiction.
So that is not, again, that's not something that I'm aware of that they do in Western medicine.
Well, they do them here at the Amen Clinic.
Yes.
For PANDAS.
Yes, they do. It's not, and yes, and I've read a lot, and I think it's called Dr. Amen. I've read a lot about him, but what is tricky and unfortunate is you have these brilliant, out of the box thinking doctors that are light years ahead of Western medicine. But the treatments and the tests are tens of thousands of dollars, and insurance doesn't cover it. And so it's like it puts parents in such a weird place, because you want to find of course you want to find what's going on with your child, but you can't bankrupt your family and your house. And so that's another, or lose your house. Like that's another thing that's so hard for kids that are going through these rare illnesses. It's like these parents are taking on so much debt trying to find answers. But yes, I have read about him and seen that she's had something called a neuroquant, which when I ask, don't let me forget to go back to the doctor that diagnosed her, but a neuroquant is typically done in adults and looking for, I think, like Alzheimer's, dementia. It's not regularly done in pediatrics, but it was something that I learned about from another parent. And when I asked the Texas Children's neurologist about it, he looked at me like I had four heads. He didn't know what it was. He hadn't heard anything about it, because it's not typically done. It's not done in pediatrics.
Right.
And so Texas Children's doesn't do it. We have a neurologist outside of Texas Children's, and he's now virtual, unfortunately, but he is PANS and PANDAS friendly, but he is more like learning disability kind of focused. But because we had that history with him, he said, I don't know how to read it, but I'll order it and you can go get it done. And so she's had this image done, and I don't understand, or this imaging done. And it's hard to understand because nobody knows how to read them. There is a neurologist in Dallas that we were supposed to go see on Monday, and we rescheduled because we went to go visit my friend that has a monthly PANS and PANDAS clinic. And she's the only neurologist that I know in Texas that is PANS and PANDAS friendly. And I've been told that she knows how to read those results. And so Reagan has had the neuroquant done. I know it's not the same as the SPECT. I don't think it's the same as that. But that was the closest thing we could get to that, and balancing what tests and what treatments are we going to pursue versus what we're not is kind of, we take it day by day. If she's showing progress in what we're doing, we're going to stay the course. But yeah, that place is supposed to be incredible.
Wow. So your experience with the insurance companies.
Do you want to go back to that doctor?
Well,
first?
yeah, let's go back to the doctor. Let's go back to that, because if we get into the insurance stuff, I may forget that. So let's go back.
I might have to
go
leave
back
the
to
room.
her.
So that doctor, when I took her there, like he's like, she has fluid behind her ears, like that we need to get the fluid out. Like she needs tubes. Okay, great. Like she's dizzy. Maybe that's because that was one of her big symptoms too. Like we had the motor abnormalities, and I guess I didn't touch on that enough. She was dizzy every day, every minute of every day from February 2nd last year up until a month ago.
Wow.
And it was a boat rocking dizzy. It was not spinning. And that is where the vertigo piece came in, and the vestibular stuff. And we just exhausted our efforts on all of that. And so the dizziness slowly went away with all of the treatments, but it had plateaued for several months until this last surgery, and it was the same doctor. And so now the dizziness can be triggered with her vestibular rehab, but it's gone at baseline. Like, that's a whole nother thing that she was dealing with that I couldn't even imagine. But this doctor said she has fluid behind her ears. She needs tubes. He said, does she snore? And I said, yes. He's like, well, her tonsils are big. He said, let me go do some imaging of her adenoids. And so we had something in his office. And he's like, okay, we'll follow up. I'll send you a message in my chart and we'll figure it out. So he sent me, it was like within 24 hours, sent me this long message, and I could probably pull it up now, but he basically said, you know, I've consulted with some senior doctors, and there's something called PANS and PANDAS. And as soon as I saw those words, it's like I felt relief, because I had already thought that could be what it was and already explored it. But anytime I brought it up to another doctor, it's like I lost all credibility with that doctor. It's like they stopped listening to me. So I stopped bringing that particular diagnosis up. I would just try to work my way around it. And so he basically said, I'm not saying that that's what this is, but if it is, removing her tonsils would be like the first line of treatment for that. And if she's already snoring, her tonsils are already enlarged, that's a good case to have her tonsils removed. He said her adenoids are larger than I've ever seen in another 12-year-old child. She'd already had her adenoids removed, like when she was little, so I guess they just grow back. But he said, so worst case scenario, we remove her tonsils, she sleeps better, she's not snoring. Best case scenario, we remove her tonsils, it's PANS and PANDAS, and she starts showing improvement. And the very next day after her tonsil surgery, her gait was different. Her walk was different. Wow. It wasn't normal, but it was noticeably different. She didn't have the shaking movements. It more looked like she was walking on a tightrope. She was still working with it. And so we saw him, I remember it because of all of the twos. We saw him on April 22nd, the first time. She had her tonsillectomy, adenoidectomy tubes put in her ears on May 2nd. And on May 22nd, so 20 days after that, her walk and her gait was normal.
All because they took out her tonsils and her adenoids.
That was yes, because that's where the infection was. Now that's kind of step one. The treatment protocol for PANS and PANDAS also includes like NSAIDs for inflammation, ibuprofen, Aleve. She was taking that for pain around the clock.
Right.
So we think that contributed and that helped. She took steroids after surgery. Steroids help with inflammation. And I had asked doctors, could we just try like a week of steroids? You know, just trying to get them, you know, along the way, just to see if anything would help her. So she was on steroids, she took NSAIDs, and she had her tonsils out. And so it was the combination of all of those things that made just the biggest difference. And so Reagan still laughs, like the first time we went and saw him. I mean, and I'm not a crier. I'm usually pretty in control of my emotions, but I cried and I hugged him. And, you know, we go back and see him probably every 6 months. And Reagan's like, Mom, don't make it weird. Don't make it weird, Mom.
Don't make it weird.
And I'm like, I just want to invite him over to Thanksgiving. That's not weird. He doesn't have family here. She's like, Mom, stop making it weird.
That's weird.
Yeah. But no, I will sing his praises forever because he thought out of the box. He was very honest. He's like, I just think it could be on the differential of a diagnosis. I think it's at least worth checking into and exploring. And so that ended up being what it was. And then, you know, she had to go through IVIG for 6 months with, if you don't know what that is, it's intravenous immunoglobulin therapy. It's like a blood product. And it's basically getting healthy antibodies, if I understand
I've
it
seen
correct.
you post about that.
From other people. I think like one bolus of it takes 1,000 donors to get that, to pull that part out of the product. And it's not easy on your body, but my understanding is it helps with inflammation, and then it tries to come in and like teach your immune system in your body how to act appropriately, because basically her immune system's response to an infection was to attack the basal ganglia instead of the illness. And so it's trying to reteach her body how to react. And so going to insurance, that was a big thing. There are parents that have fought for years trying to get IVIG approved, and there's states, I think California, Tennessee, I've been following legislation in other states, but there are some states that have recently passed legislation that IVIG must be covered for treatment for PANS and PANDAS. Like insurances cannot deny it. And so that took a lot. And like I said, Reagan, that's probably the only time she heard me yell throughout the whole thing was at insurance.
Insurance. I have discussions with this with other friends of mine, and I've been to Europe and take kids every summer and hear stories from other group leaders that have had things happen, and they go. I think as a group leader last year, had a wrist injury and went into a clinic, like an ER in Italy, and all she had to pay was the non-resident fee is like $65. And I have a friend of mine that moved to the Philippines, and her husband, before they even became quote unquote citizens, he had a mild heart issue. She had to go in, and they were getting physicals to do scuba diving, and they were for like 6 weeks. The first 6 weeks they were there, they went to the hospital like 4 or 5 times. It only cost him around $500. And here in the States, for his heart issue, you're looking at close to 5-6 figures.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't understand why in a country like the United States we have the highest standard of living, and we James is trying to grab his microphone. We can still hear you.
Step away from the mic.
Why we have the absolute worst health care. People I've talked to in Canada. My mom had knee replacement surgery, and it cost her nothing. And people say, well, they have free insurance. Well, they don't. They pay higher taxes.
Right.
But it doesn't come out of their check. And you don't have special interest groups lobbying on Capitol Hill.
Right.
And are in cahoots with whoever the heck they're in cahoots with. And for me, I mean, like, when it's affecting kids, that's when I start getting pissed off.
Right.
I mean, I'll talk to, because I've had friends of mine work for health insurance companies, and they are trained to reject all claims right off the bat.
They are in the business of no.
Yeah.
One of the parents that helped me and reached out to me was I don't know if it was spouse or boyfriend of a childhood classmate. I mean, I won't say friend, because we haven't seen each other since high school graduation, but this is somebody I went through elementary school, middle school, high school with. And so she reached out to me, and basically he was high up within the insurance company, but oversaw the pharmaceutical piece, and that was his job, or is his job. But 5 or 6 years ago, his son was diagnosed with PANS and PANDAS. So he had a very helpful perspective, because he understood how insurance worked, because he worked for the insurance company. He understood the pharmaceutical side with IVIG, and then he had a son that needed treatment for it. And so he was a huge resource for us, because he told me the certain words to make sure I include. And so I started all of my communication with United Healthcare. I started copying it through their portal link. So it, just like in education, you need to put it in writing. Yeah. Instead of it being the phone call with them, I would have the phone call, and then I would follow it up with an email to them, so everything could be documented. And so he was a huge help. And so I think her IVIG, each round would have been about $50,000.
Whoa.
And she had 6. One a month, basically, August to December. And so while I say
$50,000,
while I say insurance is terrible, I mean, they did cover things, but it's you have to just fight and beg and plead for every little thing they give you. But that's they're in the business of no, that's how they're trained. That's their job.
And they're multi-billion-dollar industries. I mean, it's again, going back to some of your posts on Facebook, you've touched a little bit on that with insurance companies, not at length, which I think has been pretty good, because you kept the focus on Reagan, which in her recovery, which is where it should have been in her diagnosis. But I think a lot of people will relate to to the insurance, and and this is part of why I wanted to bring you on here, because I know I'm assuming that you're in groups for PANS and PANDAS, and when people start researching, and you're going to be more than willing to share this. You're
Yes.
more than able to share this information out there, because I'm sitting here and like literally I'm not doing it physically, but literally I have cartoon jaw with my jaws on the ground, with just, I mean, it's like with doctors, if you challenge them, they think that, well, I'm a doctor, I went to medical school.
Some of them, it's an ego thing.
I don't care. It's my daughter.
Right.
Don't make me throat punch you. Let's go.
That's funny
This
that
is
you
my
said
kid.
that, because that's a phrase I use all the time. That's my phrase with Reagan. If anybody tries to take you, just punch him in the throat punch
Yeah,
him.
I mean, it just.
Yeah.
So I have a question, and I'll try not to start an argument fight on Facebook or anywhere who watches it. But
Because
where are the
we
hidden
do
costs?
tend to trigger people with this podcast.
Okay.
When you say it's $50,000 for an IVIG treatment for one, where's the cost? Like what's the hidden charge behind all that?
I mean, I could break out my explanation of benefits, but it's done at a hospital, so you have the hospital fee. You have to be under the care of a doctor, so you have that fee. It's a blood product, so you have the fee for the actual medication, and I think that's where a lot of it comes from.
I'm just trying to understand where that cost is.
It's also one of the I'm going to lose the word, but it's one of the medications that people typically have a bad response to, like an anaphylactic reaction. And so you're monitored with a nurse by you the whole time. So I'm sure there's a cost
So they have
for
allergic
that.
reactions to it.
And they give her Benadryl, they give her a steroid, they have EpiPens. And so she's very closely monitored too.
Wow.
So I'm sure that all comes into it. But honestly,
do you see any bloat in the fee that maybe could be reduced?
I would need to explore the explanation of benefits. I'll be honest, like
hospital fee maybe is $30,000 and then the rest of it's $20,000.
I mean,
kind of thing.
maybe I should probably look at that, but I
It
haven't
just
really.
seems to be a ridiculous amount of number to help a child live.
Yeah. And I will say something else we learned is when your doctor like sends you a note, like a summary visit of your doctor's visit, like the summary. A lot of those summaries were not what went down in that doctor's visit. And Lee and I didn't know until, I mean, we've got binders, because I was like, this is not okay. Like, you can't, thinking that we were going to be able to do something to help. And I'm still committed to trying to help make change. But I mean, the medical industry and Dell Children's is a pretty big machine. But when we went back and reviewed the doctor's notes and the nurse's notes in the hospital, what they wrote is not, I mean, some of it was true, but not all of it was accurate. And then there were things that Dell doctors that we saw afterwards would say, discussed F&D or whatever it was with patient. They didn't discuss any of that with us.
Did they charge for that?
Oh, I'm sure.
Like they wrote in there, discussed F&D for a patient and it cost this amount of money.
Probably. But honestly, and still, because she's so much better, but like January, she had a bad flare. And then February 2nd, I've never called EMS for my child before, but February 2nd of this year, which freaked me out because it was a year to the date of everything happening, she had a very similar episode where she suddenly got dizzy, suddenly got lightheaded, her heart rate was up, all of the things. And so we ended up calling EMS for her and took her to the hospital. We were able to find she had mycoplasma, which is walking pneumonia, and her body was trying to react in the same way like it did originally. We just found the infection. All that to say, I haven't dug into that piece of it. What Lee and I, we talk about division of labor a lot in the house. And so I will say that I have a medical degree in Google College of Medicine.
Right, me too. YouTube mechanic.
Google
Reagan,
MD.
yes. Reagan will be like, Mom, but the doctor, and I'm like, you forgot. I have a medical degree from Google College of Medicine. And then she just rolls her eyes like a teenage girl does. But Lee basically handled the financial piece. So, I mean, I couldn't, I was sleeping and breathing everything medical. And I didn't have the capacity for bills or deductibles or co-pays or anything else.
Okay.
But we probably have those. But yeah, that might be something
I'm just curious
worth looking
because,
into.
with all the corruption that gets exposed lately,
Right.
It just seems to me like when you've got inflated costs like that to save a child's life, or
right,
and insurance isn't going to cover it, then where's that money going?
Right.
And first of all, where's it going to come from? Because $300,000 for 6 treatments is where do you get that just out of thin air?
Yeah.
If the insurance company isn't going to cover it, and so what does the hospital and the doctor do at that point?
There's even a fee in one of the parent groups I'm in. There was somebody who was wanting to take their child to a specialist, and that specialist was at Texas Children's off Lake Creek Parkway.
Mm-hmm.
They also have a clinic in Kyle, and they have a clinic right off North Mopac. And she wasn't going to see that specialist because, you typically have your copay that you would charge. But if she goes to the specialist off North Lake Creek Parkway, whatever, if that's the right name of the street, they charge her like an additional $200 for a hospital fee, a hospital facility fee. And so that's where all of Reagan's specialists are. They're all at Texas Children's. And so I've been fighting that additional hospital fee. And so when I'll go in and take her and they want to collect like the copay and the fee, and I said, I'm happy to pay the copay. I'm not paying the hospital fee. And I said, is this something that Texas Children's is doing, or this is something that the insurance company is doing? And she's like, it's part of the contract with insurance. I said, well, I will be contacting insurance because my child isn't in the hospital. She's seeing her doctor that we need to see. And she said, if you call them, they'll, I can't promise you that they'll waive it, but they'll take care of it.
They normally do.
Yeah. And so there's so many. So this mom wasn't even going to take her child to the doctor she wanted to see. It's just like, the medical industry is broken, insurance industry is broken, education's broken. Like, it's like we need a hard reset.
Him and I get in these conversations typically after church on Sundays, or after Tuesday night prayer sometimes, or even before. Right. It's amazing how few people pay attention to what's going on. And I'm sure, in my opinion, you're a super mom and you're going to advocate for your kid. But how many parents that are going through this just stop? And I'm sure you're in Facebook groups for this.
Yeah.
And, what do those parents say? What do those people in those groups say?
I'm in a couple different ones. And what's hard is, there's kids with PANS and PANDAS. And when I talk about severe behaviors that they're not eating, where they need a feeding tube, there are children that are so obsessive compulsive to germs and things that they won't leave their room. Reagan's severity was with the dizziness and the motor abnormalities. But there are kids and families who are not able to function. There are families that are having to call police to help them because their PANS and PANDAS child is flaring and they're violent and they're afraid for their other kids. So while Reagan's was severe, there's levels of severe and extreme. And so I'm grateful that she didn't have the aggression and the anger, and that her OCD was not as debilitating as some kids. But what happens, unfortunately, with those kids with PANS and PANDAS that present with more psychological type symptoms that have all normal labs and normal images, they think it's a psych thing. And they won't explore anything else or infections or anything else. And there's a family that I met at the Capitol who Dell reported them to Child Protective Services. They thought their child had PANS and PANDAS. They needed treatment for that. And this is their story that I'm kind of retelling. Dell thought it was a psychiatric issue, and CPS took control over their child, and they had to fight and get their child back because they didn't agree with the parents, or the parents weren't agreeing that was completely psychiatric, or that, I don't know all of the details of it, but like the child was refusing to eat. The child was in ICU. And so that would make me nervous about Dell, and that's part, and probably any facility probably needs to report things they think of a concern. But like when you're disagreeing with the parent that obviously loves their child, like I don't there needs to be protection, and there is some legislation that's been presented this session about parental rights in medical situations.
Yeah, I've been following that.
Yes,
Yeah.
and so it's because of cases like that family had to fight to get their child, like you already have all the medical bills, your family's already in crisis, and then now
you're throwing this on top of it. I can attest to that, because when Lindsay broke her leg, we lived in Southwest Austin. We went to Seton Southwest, and out there on I guess it's 1626, whatever it is. We go out there, and 1826 or whatever.
Okay.
So we go out there, and I was working at Austin High. I came off the practice field. I stink. I smell. And I get in there, and CPS starts asking me questions. And the one at Seton Southwest was very nice.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I was at football practice. She was with, my stepdaughter, and they were jumping off the couch, landing on pillows, and she landed the wrong way. And she's like, oh, so it was an accident. I said, yes, ma'am, it was. She goes, great. Well, then they transfer us to Dell Children's. And I rode an ambulance with Lindsay, and because they were going to have to put her in a spica cast. And we get up there, and granted, I'm tired, I'm hungry, and I'm worried about my daughter. This is my youngest and my baby.
And you smell, don't forget that part.
And I didn't smell too good. And we're sitting there, and another CPS person comes in, and she was a little more aggressive in the way she was asking questions. And she said, so you weren't there? Where were you? I said, I was at my job.
Yeah.
I was coaching football. I was at work. And she goes, well, how old is your stepdaughter? I was like, she's high school. Is she responsible? Like, she's very responsible. She loves her sisters.
Yeah.
And I just kept on. And she asked one question. I said, you know what? Why don't you call your compatriot down at Seton Southwest, and she'll give you all the answers I just gave you. I said, but right now you're pissing me off.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid that if you don't leave this room right now, what's going to happen?
Dismissed.
Because you're questioning me about my daughter, and you're making it you're alleging that we did something to her, and we did not.
Yeah.
She was with my stepdaughter, who is very responsible, and don't sit there and try to blame her. It was an accident. And I just looked at her, and she looked at me, and I said, we're done.
Yeah.
She goes, well, sir, I have to ask these questions. I said, I have no problem with you asking questions. It's the way you ask them. You suck at asking these questions. That was old Daryl.
Well,
old Daryl.
It's okay.
New
Still
Daryl.
Well, and there's something with
Daryl would be
presentation.
nicer.
Like, obviously, there's a need for CPS. And
Well,
there are
yeah,
kids
exactly.
who have awful parents and awful situations who need people like that to step in and help
100%.
them. But again, there's also ways to
There's better ways
question
of
and-
asking
yes.
questions, and
Yes.
that's
Without
what got
being
me.
accusatory.
Yeah, without being
Yeah.
accusatory. I mean,
And-
and they're not supposed to. They're just supposed to ask you questions. They're not supposed to put emotion into it.
right.
I know people that work for CPS,
Yeah.
and I've dealt with CPS before as a mandated reporter.
Right.
As a teacher,
Mhm.
I've talked to CPS.
Mm-hmm.
I've filed several reports and have never been questioned, like the Gestapo was asking me questions. I mean, you want to put a heat lamp on me? I mean, I was pretty upset. I mean, and I can imagine, getting back to this situation here. I mean, I know what I saw on your Facebook post, and I kind of reading between the lines, I could tell there's some frustration there.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder, like, literally, like in your groups, how many parents just feel like just putting their hands up
Yeah.
and just giving up because the insurance alone,
No,
and then the
there's-
lack of answers from
Yeah.
the medical profession.
I mean, there's definitely desperation, especially in those kids with the extreme behaviors. And again, Dell might be great at some things, but PANS and PANDAS is not one of them. And so, and that is an overwhelming theme in any of the groups I'm in. They're like, do not take your child to Dell for this. Like, they've saved,
It's unfortunate.
lots of children, I'm sure, and have done good and for a lot of other people. But for this particular illness, it's almost, I don't even know. It's just there's
It's
just
almost
doctors
like
that
they did a cost benefit analysis, and it's not in their benefit to provide the services over there that everybody needs.
I mean,
That's my guess.
and kind of living on reputation.
Yeah.
Because their reputation is pretty stellar. I mean, people say, well, you're lucky to live in Central Texas with Dell Children. I'm like, am I really?
UT Medical.
Not really, because I've heard negative things.
Yeah, but again, I don't want to like totally throw them under the bus. I know a family who's had a great experience with them, and but just PANS and PANDAS related. Absolutely not. And like I said, there's two neurologists at Texas Children's that completely disagree. They don't agree with the diagnosis. The last neurologist that I was trying to get the F&D removed from her chart, he said, well, you do realize that PANDAS stands for pediatric autoimmune neurological psychiatric disorder. Like the psychiatric piece is what he kept going back to. And I said, yes, I'm aware. But basically trying to gaslight me and saying this is in my child's
head. Sounds like a narcissistic answer.
To gaslight me that this is in my child's head and her walking like. So what I would say over and over again in that day at the Capitol, originally, I thought Lee was going to go with me to the Capitol, and he's great at all of this speaking. Well, he's great. He will tell you he is not, and that is his least favorite thing to do.
But he's good
as
at
being
it.
mayor.
Yeah.
But he's real, and he doesn't sound like a politician, and that's why he's such a good leader. He's not a leader because he wants to be a leader. He's a leader because he loves this community and wants to do right by it. But I thought he was going to go with me that day, and so when I signed up for the Urbanovsky family to speak, I thought it was going to be him. Then it was just Reagan and I going. And so when I checked in and I talked to the lady coordinating it, I was like, I don't think I'm going to talk. After all, my husband was coming and this is my first time here. And she's like, okay, great. And she crossed my name off the list. And then, I sat and Reagan and I were sitting in the back of the room. And then Reagan was just nudging me to talk. She's like, you should go up there. You should go up there. And I think I don't even remember what all I said there, but
Facebook remembers.
Right. It's just, if Reagan could go through all of the hard that she could do, I could get over myself and to be uncomfortable to speak in front of a room. That's like a fraction of what she had to endure. And so I'm glad that she nudged me to do that. But something else that, when she's heard me share her story, they're like, how did everything happen? Like, how did it start? And I'm like, she was living her best life. She had, social and friends and dance and happy and joyful and, all the things. And then all of a sudden, all of that was gone. And so she started interrupting me when I would say, she was living her best life. And this is in the thick of it. She would say, I am living my best life. In the thick of it.
Ooh.
And it just blows my mind.
Kids are tough.
Yeah, like, just her attitude and that.
That gets me.
So if I say that anymore, I have to follow it up with, she is living her best life, even in the thick of it. She just heard me say it so many times, and so yeah.
That gets me. That chokes me up because, when you what it's like working around kids, and first of all, speaking in front of kids and parents is way different than this right here.
Yes.
This would be moderately intimidating for me. Speaking in front of the UIL was intimidating at one point. Not anymore.
Right.
But yeah, but to hear you say that, because whenever there's a lot to the story that people don't see with Reagan whenever you post her videos. And for me, whenever James talked to me about doing this, your name popped up in my head as one of the first people to bring on because of this issue. And then whenever I saw you guys going to the Connection Churches thing, because my daughters go there. My daughters work there. My oldest works there.
Yes.
And I asked them, I said, so explain to me this day out program y'all have there. And so Lindsay explains it because it's hard to get hold of Peyton because she's a mom now.
Right.
But Lindsay was explaining it to me, and she's like, oh yeah. She goes, it's for a lot of times it's for the kids that are homeschooled. It's to give them a social deal, and we have some things that we do there. And I said, is there a lot of kids there? She's like, oh yeah, there's a lot of kids there.
Yeah.
And I said, well,
that's great.
I said, well, said Reagan Urbanovsky's up there. She's like, yeah. She's like, Dad, they've been coming to our church. I was like, okay, well, that's awesome. Just don't tell them you know me. We're all right there. I mean, but I see, again, and this is my observation, I'm a people watcher, and I observe kids a lot. And I don't know what her confidence level is like through all this, but over the last 2 months, the things that you've posted, she's gotten back into dance. And I mean, you should pull up her on Amy's page, on Reagan's page, her dancing. Oh my God. Like I got emotional when I saw her at her performance recently.
Yeah.
And she was flowing up there, and she was graceful. That's the word I should use.
She was confident.
And possibly, here it is. And possibly that this is something that you're going to cry. I mean, this is for me, as someone who's coached and is working with young people and likes to see kids at their best, this is it right here.
Right.
Because, I mean, you can see what she's been through. The confidence in her in her movements. Just look at her. She's very graceful. You can tell she's thinking about what she's supposed to do, but it's also natural. And I know dance is a really big thing for her. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure she has visions of being on the dance team at Johnson, which are good ambitions. But more importantly, I tell people this all the time. I tell my students this, and I tell the guys at Base Camp this all the time. There's strength in the struggle.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I mean, just this right here. And who would have thought a year ago?
Yeah.
I mean, look at this.
Yeah.
Look at her face.
I mean, joy.
That's her best.
Yeah. She is so joyful on stage.
And this is just recently.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. This was just this. So she had 3 team dance competitions, and then there was one convention where she performed a solo that she was supposed to do last year for her first time, but then everything kind of fell apart, so she wasn't able to. So she was able to do the solo this year, but she was able to perform the solo 4 times, and then the team dances 3 times, and just joy. And I was holding my breath that first time getting on stage, But I mean, I keep telling her, I'm like, if you learned how to walk again, like you can literally do anything. Mm-hmm, you can do anything. But it's the learning how to walk and then the learning how to dance again, and a very competitive activity.
Dance is very this is a different level than just school dancing. And your daughter was on the dance team,
right.
and Lindsay was the manager for all 4 years, and it's some cutthroat stuff. And I mean. And what people don't, if people are new to all this and Amy's story with Reagan, what they don't see, if they don't go back and take a look, is the work this child has put in rehab. I mean, I don't even like walking backwards anywhere, and the walking backwards and stuff, and to watch her. And first of all, I applaud you guys for putting this stuff out there, because, I mean, it's being vulnerable. But it's also a major teaching tool for other people, that they can see this and are like, that's what my kid has, and this is what's going on with my son or with my daughter. Does it happen in girls more than guys, or is it pretty even? Are there statistics on that?
I don't know what those statistics are.
But I mean, just I literally went back and watched this a couple of times whenever you posted it. Because I had never met you. Mm-hmm. I've never met your family. I've never met Lee, never met your boys. I know we talked about, whenever your son was on the track team at middle school.
Yeah.
Gave a few pointers, because I just, I like coaching kids. But just watching this and having followed, like, I'm emotionally invested in this. And I'm like seeing this. And I just like seeing kids overcome adversity. And watching that was like, dang, man, she's out there killing it.
Yeah.
Imagine when she gets fully recovered, what she's going to be able to do.
Well, that's what I tell her, because like she still struggles with the backwards walking and the balance and all the things, and so she's
but you can't tell,
right?
In that you cannot tell, because I think you posted something, was about a week and a half ago. We're like near the end of school, and you posted something, and she was at one of her appointments, and she was doing the backwards walking.
Right.
You could tell there's still a little instability. But she doesn't have the dizziness anymore?
No, the dizziness is gone as of a month or so ago after that last procedure. She had negative pressure in her ear, and so I think there was multiple things that kind of contributed to all of her symptoms. That the dizziness obviously was with the onset of the illness. And then I don't know if there was, like, if the dizziness would have happened with the fluid in her ears and the negative pressure with or without the PANDAS diagnosis. Like, that's not typically a symptom of PANS and PANDAS, but it doesn't mean it's not all related. Like, inflammation and all the things can cause weird things, but all of the other treatments got her dizziness. We ended up using her dizziness kind of on a pain scale because she's used to that now. And then dizziness can mean different things to people. So it's just, she said, I feel like I'm on a boat. That's what she said, forever and ever.
I know what that's like. Like if you go on a cruise and you get off and you have the
sea legs,
the wobbly stuff.
And so we would use it like on a pain scale 1 through 10 just to try to gauge like, okay, if this is your baseline, because they were trying to do different movements and vestibular testing and therapy to try to figure out which side is it and what makes it better or worse. And that could help them with the treatment plan. And so she, at her worst, I mean, it was like an 8 or a 9 at rest. And then with movement, it would go up to a 10, which is terrible. Then I would say since about maybe November, October, she's held at like a 2. And then it didn't get any better.
Right.
And so I wasn't okay with it. We weren't going to stop until she's at a 0. Like that was part of like the commitment that I made to her and to our family. And so we took her to an ENT in Fort Worth in March because another parent, that I connected with through social media and kids recommended this ENT to look into some other type of inner ear disorders that could be causing dizziness. And so I'm like, well, we'll go see him. And we had to wait like 4 or 5 months to get in to see him. And we went, and so he did some vestibular testing. He said she has negative pressure in her left ear. That would explain the symptoms getting worse with certain movements. And then he wanted to order some other testing to try to rule out some of those other inner ear disorders. And one was a CAT scan, which exposes them to a good amount of radiation.
Right.
And so we came back to her original doctor that diagnosed her, that's her ENT here, and said, hey, we took her to this doctor. He wants to do the CT scan because he's kind of like my baseline. Like, we're going to come back. And he had gotten to a point, our doctor here was just like, I've exhausted my efforts. Like, I don't, this is out of the realm of what I know in pediatric ENT. And that's how that was another reason why we ended up in Fort Worth. But he checked and he said she does have negative pressure and absolutely we'll do the tubes. And I said, what do you think about the CT scan? And he just said, I think that likelihood of her having one of those other things is very rare, but you can do it. It's going to expose her to radiation. And then we just decided to do the tube surgery first and just see if that took care of it. But yeah, that last part of dizziness, I mean, she is more reserved with her milestones than I am. I'm like, it's just like...
Well, she's a kid too.
Yes, she's a teenage girl.
She's a young person.
Yes, and so she's just taken it all in her stride, like with a resilience and a grace, and I call it a quiet confidence. Like she likes to dance, and some people like to dance or get on stage because they like the attention. They want the attention that they get from it, and that's fine. Like, and then some people want to dance. I'm sure there's lots of other reasons, but like Reagan wants to dance because she likes dancing.
She likes to dance.
She's never the loudest or the look at me kid or be in the front middle of the picture or jumping up and down to get the special part in the dance. Like that's just not her. And I think sometimes people associate being more quiet or reserved with not being confident. And so I just say she has just a very quiet confidence about her.
Yeah, I was going to ask, how's her confidence lately? Like through the roof?
Way better than I could have ever been at that age after going through all of this. But I should say, I mean, look what she overcame. I also think, and you'll be able to relate to this with the dance being competitive. I mean, so many girls are putting their worth in what the person next to them is doing. instead of like in themselves and the right thing. And so these girls will get so down on themselves because somebody else made a level higher than them or a different class than them, or this person placed higher in the solo, and they put their worth in other things and comparing themselves to other people. And they put their joy of dance in like numerical things and classes, whereas we're not there. And I don't think Reagan would have been, I don't think she would have had that mindset necessarily, but I definitely think it makes this season in dance easier for her because her focus is on dancing and dancing for the joy of it and her personal best and improving each day from her baseline instead of like looking outward. And so
she competes with herself.
Yes.
Well, did she used to get nervous before performing?
So last year was her first solo. She started getting more nervous after COVID, like third or fourth grade. And so more nervous than she even does now. And I couldn't put my finger on it. Was it because we were so isolated for COVID? Part of me thinks some of this PANS and PANDAS stuff was brewing. And it's just like the bucket finally tipped.
It finally tipped over.
Because she did get a little anxious before. But in all of this, like trying to find the good in it, this is when Reagan like will roll her eyes at me. But I think just trying to find like when you've gone through something hard and you've hurt, I think if you can find purpose or help other people, then that's part of the healing for you. And I think even like I said, with the videos that we make, her and I sit and we'll just look back at how far she's come, because I have hard days. I mean, I've had a couple of pretty hard months since she was like in the thick of things. And I'm like, what is wrong with me? Like my kid is doing better. And I think it's just kind of like your body's been stuck in that fight or flight. And then you're just, your body, like just trying to come out of it and heal. But making those videos and looking through things, I think, is part of our healing and therapy. It's more for us, I guess, and family. And then if it reaches people, it'll help, which it seems like from the people that have reached out to me on social media with kiddos that are struggling, it has. And then in finding purpose through her suffering, like Connection Church, we would not have known about Connection Academy.
I never even heard of it.
We wouldn't have known at all. And so that was a blessing for her to still be connected with kids, because she was back homebound after her big flare in January. So that's just been a blessing. And the connections we've made there, we wouldn't, had she not gone through what she went through, because Connection Church really reached out to us. One of my really good friends, our friends are Vanessa and Micah Petrie, and I think they still go there, but they're pretty involved and plugged in, I think, with Connection Church, or at least they used to be. And so we were homeless church-wise when all of this started. And so she asked if she could reach out, and man, that group of people just stepped up. They didn't even know us, and they were checking on us like once a week, asking for specific things. And there are communities full of tons of amazing churches. So not to say that this church is better than the other church, but the point is we got plugged into a church family, and it helped. It was a hard reset for us and what's important and our priorities. And it got us back into church and building on our faith again, which we had, it's just like we just had our toe in it before.
Well, and it matters. And it does matter where you go. And, like for me, we go to Vertical. We go to Vertical Chapel. I can't picture me going anywhere else. I love it there. I love the people there. I love the men's group I'm a part of. And, James got me sitting on the front row now. I used to be a guy that used to show up, and then as soon as church was over, man, I'm out the door. And I showed up one Sunday. He's like, "Man, go sit up in the front." I was like, I can't pick my nose or nothing up there, bro. I mean, so
camera might get you.
But for my girls, Connection's been really good for them.
Right.
For Peyton, who works there now.
Yeah.
And she feels like she's called to be involved in ministry somewhere. And then for Lindsay, as a dad, couldn't ask for anything more.
Yeah.
And to hear Peyton met Cooper there, her husband, who's a good man of God, and then for Lindsay, she's had some doofuses that better not ever run
We've
into
all
you.
been a doofus.
Hey, well, I can tell you what, you guys that dated my daughter Lindsay, don't let me run into you, because there will be some serious questions. But there was, I asked her about this particular guy, and she's like, Dad, he's not as far on his faith journey as I am.
Wow. That's incredible.
Smarter than I am. And so, the Connection Church, and again, my girls go there. My daughter works there.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that they had that program until you posted something
Right.
about it. And I know, Reagan was not being homeschooled; she was on homebound,
right?
Which is different because you're being serviced by the ISD,
and that opened a whole can of worms too. Like I try hard to keep things positive, and focus on how this whole situation with her has made us better and what we've learned from it. But there are just days that sometimes, I'm just mad. I'm just angry. So she was homebound, and we went and had an IEP meeting, ARD meeting, to start homebound services. And during that meeting, I had already heard about it. And so I brought it up in the meeting, and I was like, so there's this and they call it a hybrid homeschool program through our church that I'd like to get her involved in. Like she's already behind academically. If it helps fill any gaps, like that would be great. And then just for her mental well-being, for socializing. And the committee was like, no, that sounds great. And I was like, I know like they have a curriculum that we can use, and it's some there, some at home. And they're like, no, that sounds great. All about it. And then I don't know, the beginning of May, I got a call that the registrar at the school, Hayes School, needed to do an investigation because it had been reported that Reagan was enrolled in 2 different schools. And there's nothing at Connection Academy like when so once that happened, it's fine.
we have
so
the,
many.
We have
I know.
the same. We have the same
so
thought,
many,
by the way.
Right, and so
it's people being
there's
busybodies.
So many more wonderful people out there than not, but and trying to navigate that, trying to like, I don't want to do anything wrong. Like it made me feel like I was doing something wrong with a week left of the hybrid homeschool program at Connection Academy. But everything that I read online, it was like they can't, like there's no courses that you can do at Connection that would transfer over for high school.
Right.
It wasn't every day. Like it was a couple days a week, and there was no. I mean, it was what was best for. It was what was best for Reagan.
Best for Reagan. It was like a supplement.
Yes. And so basically, like with a week left of the Connection Academy program, I was back and forth with the school and with her Hayes School, and they're talking to people. And sometimes I think they're just like, I'm not sure. Let me get back to you, because they want to say somebody else has the bad news. They don't want to give me the bad news. But basically they were like, yeah, you have to unenroll her from one of them. And I was like,
well, and if that's the case, then parents need to unenroll their kids from like Khan Academy and Sylvan Learning Systems. And because you do realize there are school districts that have working relationships with these companies that parents can go and send. I mean, again, it's the education piece where people don't, and I guarantee it's some busybody out there that saw it and reported it.
Well, and I try not to sit in it too long, because I just try not to. But there's been a couple things throughout her journey or through our journey that have been hurtful, but I try to focus on the good. And like everybody has bad days. If I just assume like everybody's doing the best they can, or like when like if I don't even know how to say it, but like if somebody would report me because they thought I did something wrong, like that's not where my mind goes. That's not where I'm at. And maybe that's how they think about things. Like, I don't know. That probably doesn't even make sense. But there's just things where people's minds go sometimes that completely blow me away that I would never consider. And that's just how their mind thinks and how their mind works. And so there have been some things that have been hard and heavy on top of the things with Reagan. But it's just helped us. It's just opened our eyes again to priorities and what's important to our family and who's important to our family, who we're investing our time in. And there's been, by and far so many more wonderful things. But Connection Academy is considered for the school district, at least for Hayes, as another school. And so it's fine.
It is what it is, I guess.
It is what it is. The sad part.
Play the game the system.
Do they have teachers up there? I mean, that's. I don't know that they have teachers.
Connection, no, they do. They have teachers. I mean, it is truly like they have classes and it's split up. I mean, and they do all the things like a school would do. It's not accredited, and you can't have courses that transfer for high school. So it's like a hybrid homeschool. It's like a co-op, basically. Like you go there and you do have teachers and programs, but you're only there either Tuesday, Thursday, or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And then you have the homeschool piece that you choose to do. You get it on Thursday evening. You just have it done before the following Tuesday.
Khan Academy has teachers too.
It's fine.
Well, we're not starting any trouble on.
Well, no, yeah. I'm just saying. I'm just saying that if people are going to point out one thing, and again, to me, it comes down to education and knowing that there are other programs out there that offer the same thing that Connection Church does.
I think it was hurtful because it bothered somebody else enough to bring it up to like school. Somebody that's already like.
Is it because it's a church-based school?
I honestly don't know. Like I said, I try not to sit in it too long, but it's little things like that sometimes I'll just my brain will just loop and it'll just give me a couple bad days. And then I'm like, that's ridiculous. Like we've come through all of these things and Connection Academy has been a blessing for her and she is going to go there. That's people ask me long-term plans and I'm like, I don't know what's happening a month from now. Like over the last 14 or 15 months, things would change month to month. So that's been another lesson in like control. Like I'm not really in control of anything. Right. God's in control of everything. Right. And the more I try to fight it, the tighter I hold on, the harder it is. Yeah. So I try to do the best I can in the moment with the information I have, and pivot a lot. Like we call an audible a lot. But the plan right now is Connection Academy for her next year because we think that will set her up academically, emotionally. It'll give her more time physically to heal. So she'll be better prepared going into Johnson in 9th grade. Now, her sacrifice to that is she loved the Dazzlers middle school dance team. And so that was a big decision for her. That's a hard decision to make, but
especially at 8th grade.
Right. And that was part of the reason that the timing of the complaint came was because they had like an end of the year Dazzler banquet that we were hoping she could go to like wrap up her season. Like she didn't get to finish it, but there was so much different information coming back and forth on like what she's allowed to do, what she's not allowed to do. And so the timing just came to where it felt like she couldn't go to the banquet. And then by the time we got the green light that she could, it was the day of, and we were over it. But it was just a little tiny, it's a little tiny thing in the scheme of her whole story.
Yeah, it's something that doesn't matter.
Right. And sometimes we just need that perspective, but
well, and it's hard. It's hard to have that perspective because we're human.
Right.
And we want I get it. As a high school teacher and someone who coached, I would talk to parents of kids, and one of the hardest things to do as a coach is cut kids.
Yeah.
And when I've worked at schools, I've worked for some amazing ADs. We always had this conversation. Does the kid need your program more than you need the kid? What's kind of the priority here? Because I've got news for people. I've got, and I have several former athletes listening to this podcast. I got a lot of kids that would not have graduated from high school if it hadn't been for athletics. And just found out I have a former student that actually lives in Kyle, and he actually flunked my government class his senior year, and he had to do credit recovery, and I helped him with that. But we had an agreement. He didn't fulfill his part, and Marshall, this is for you, buddy. I'm so over the top proud of that young man and what he has done and the father that he is. And you could go down example after example of kids that need programs more than the program really needs the kid. And as someone involved in that, you have to determine, what are you in this for?
Right.
And I look at it from the standpoint of not to single anybody out, not that this is the situation, but people that want to snitch and do reports, like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
You're focusing your attention on a kid. Like, if you're upset with me, come speak to me.
Right.
Come speak to me. I'm pretty open-minded. I'll listen to you.
Yeah.
I may disagree with you,
Yeah.
which I probably will, but don't take it out on my kid.
Yeah.
Come talk to me. And I still feel that way about my daughters, and they're adults.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
well, what's the quote? Like, comparison is a thief of joy.
Oh,
like,
my
there's,
gosh.
and so, I mean, that it really is. I mean, if you are focusing on you and your family and everybody kind of doing their best, you're going to lead a much happier life instead of comparing yourself to other people.
And take a minute and look at what this young lady's been through.
Yeah.
And you're going to do.
Yeah.
You're going to take
know.
that step. I mean,
I think, and this goes back to.
This is when it's hard to pray for people sometimes, but we still do.
We do it anyway.
Yes.
We do it anyway.
Pray for your enemies.
Mm-hmm. And not for their downfall. That's the added piece to that.
And that's kind of what took me back to, like, at the beginning we were talking about with Lee being mayor and people thinking there's like special treatment. And so I think through some of the school and dance decisions, which honestly are nobody else's opinion, shouldn't say that. We don't need anybody else's opinion on it. It's not their business what the school and dance and all of those things are. Decisions are made for my daughter, but people just make assumptions that, I mean, I think one of the quotes, like, and people say stuff on social media was, well, I guess the rules don't apply to everybody. I mean, they do, like, but it's just
that's when you have to check out of the comments.
Right. Well, exactly. And
people will say anything online.
Yes.
Well,
I digress.
And in all fairness to that, I hear that a lot, especially at the high school level, because, we have dance, we have cheer, we have color guard, we have stuff like that, and those are all tryout processes. The thing is, if a school, I look at it from the standpoint of coaches and teachers, if they hire somebody in the summer and their daughter has been a cheerleader or their daughter has been in dance, there are accommodations made that if they're coming from a school where they run the dance team or cheer team, where they get placed on the team at the new school. It's happened at every school I've worked at. It's no different than a coach gets hired, his son's a quarterback. Are people going to say, oh, well, he gets to be quarterback because his dad's a coach? No, maybe he's that good.
Right.
And there's accommodations for that. Now, with that scenario, you got to fill out forms, but this happens across this state. Right. On a yearly basis.
Maybe they hired the coach so they could get the quarterback.
Well, sometimes they do, but I mean, but it happens everywhere. There are accommodations that are made, and there are some schools that won't.
Yeah.
But a majority of schools in this state, if a teacher comes in and their daughter was on the cheer team, had made the cheer team at the other school, then what they do is it's a process of they contact the other cheer coach, find out what's going on, and then talk to the new cheer coach, and then that child is placed on the cheer team. It happens everywhere.
Well, and I think where we get in trouble, or where, you have the parents that are unhappy or complaining, is because a lot of parents are putting their value and worth in what their kids are accomplishing and what team they're on and what grade they got and what awards they got. And so it's just this dysfunctional cycle, because you have these kids that are paying attention to what the person next to them is doing and comparing themselves and putting their value in where they land in comparison to their peers. And then you have parents that are putting their value and worth and, how they think they are as a parent based on what team their kid lands on or what level or what. And so it's just this very dysfunctional cycle that can't.
I don't remember it being like that when we were kids, and we're all around the same age.
It's just different.
It's different now, and
the
this right here,
social media, and
this right here.
Well, now you've got
think about it. When we were in school, you graduated what year?
91.
Yeah. I don't ask that question.
89.
That's a dangerous look. I graduated 89.
Okay.
We had rec soccer, and there was a little bit of select soccer.
Mm-hmm.
There was no, not that I know of, there was no dance teams outside of school. I mean, I'm sure people were doing dance lessons, but like competitive dance, I had a young lady in my class this year, competitive cheer.
Yeah.
She was gone all the time, man. She's in Florida, man. She's up in Dallas, and they're up there, they're competing, and they're trying to win rings and jackets and all
I
this
just feel like
other
kids
stuff.
are losing their childhood.
And I mean,
the childhood that we grew up with is
and they're spending all this money to go do these things. Got kids playing summer baseball this summer and softball, and I mean, it's ultra competitive. And I didn't grow up with this, so it's not foreign to me because I've coached in high school, but I see it.
You've seen the progression.
And when I think there's a certain expectation from parents when they've paid all this money, and then you know what happens. You've been around it long enough, Amy, that when my kid doesn't make the team, well, they played for this team outside of school. Well, that team's not really that good.
Right.
Or
I mean,
whatever.
and I don't want to step on anybody's toes, but most organizations will take your money for your kid to play on their team,
100%.
whatever it is. But
that's the way it is. I mean, and then if people don't like it, they go form their own teams.
Mm-hmm.
They form their own dance studios or whatever the case may be. And we're fortunate in this community to have some really good dance academies in town that are run by some very reputable people that do an amazing job and are going to do what's best for kids.
And I think if you look at like Johnson in particular, like their dance program, their cheer program, their athletic programs, I mean, there are some quality programs that are feeding kids into Johnson and giving that school a reputation, like that they're the school to beat, but at what cost? And so that is something that I noticed with our family. I mean, because basically I described it like COVID hit us. Like COVID hit, world stopped, we quit doing anything. So then we had to rely on each other. So remember when everybody was like doing puzzles during COVID and like going out riding their bikes. Obviously we weren't riding bikes, but I mean, as a family, our connection instantly became stronger because we really just had each other. And all of the distractions, and not that they're all bad, but like the rigorous schedule that Reagan had. Now, granted, during the day was full of appointments, but like the evenings, it just, like our family, again, I think I said in a social media post, like we didn't come out of it unscathed, but our focus is on the right place and we're tighter as a family. And so we did have good moments and good memories in the middle of the mess and the struggle. And it's helped our perspective going forward, looking at school, even with Chase, like going into his senior year and like colleges and all of the things, like
it goes by so fast.
Yes.
And Lee didn't like the UT visit.
Oh man.
That cracked me up. I was
the
laughing
hardest,
so hard at that.
Yeah.
And what's funny is I didn't know Lee was an Aggie.
Yes.
I didn't know he was a big Aggie, but that part cracked me up. So apparently you took him to UT.
I took him to the UT visit.
We won't ask which schools in the lead. I know, he plays tennis. Tennis is a tough sport.
Yeah.
UT has a really good team. Right?
Yeah, they have a really good team.
Yeah, I think any kids that are playing tennis at UT are like being recruited to come to academies from out of the country. Yeah.
But he plays tennis and man, he's really good in band.
Yeah.
And did he play a new instrument this year? Was that what I saw?
If you are in percussion,
you
can either be in like what they call battery. Is it battery? No. Front ensemble, and that has all different types of instruments. It's basically everything except like drumline, and then I guess the drumline is battery. And so if you're in front ensemble, you don't march. I loved him in front ensemble because he was just so good at the marimba and just he's a very like quiet and reserved kid. He's like I shouldn't say true middle child because he doesn't find trouble, and a lot of middle children sometimes do. But as far as just like being low key, pretty easy chill kid, but his personality just came alive, and it wasn't until his freshman year when we saw him playing the marimba. It was great. And so he did that his freshman year and sophomore year. And then last year he switched over to drumline. And then this year he's going to do drumline again. And so I miss seeing him and front ensemble up close, but he's also enjoying drumline.
Well, and for those that will listen to this and don't know, Johnson's halftime show band.
Yeah.
They do a show which is extremely intensive. It's much different than regular marching season, because when you have show band and you're going to marching contest, you're performing that show, and there's props. You usually incorporate the dance team, sometimes the cheerleaders in it, and it's a major production that requires a lot of hours outside of school. So for those of y'all that don't know that, and for him to be playing fall tennis while doing that and making the grades that he makes, and just so everybody knows, Amy and Lee celebrate all their kids. They celebrate him and his accomplishments, because he's a pretty dang good tennis player, and he had a really good year this year. And he gets celebrated as much as Reagan. And you have an older son
we have 2 older sons. We're a blended family. There's a whole there's so many.
You have a grandkid, don't you?
I do.
We got one on the way. First one.
So fun.
And he just had his first one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Weston.
So. Yeah.
You probably see him at church every now and then.
I think. Yeah.
You've probably seen him more than I have.
Well,
I've just been busy with school finishing.
Well, and our son and daughter-in-law live in New Braunfels, and it doesn't seem like it's far, but it's harder than just to drive around the corner. And then I also think, it's different when you have children that are in like that busy time of life. And so we're trying to find that balance, and we definitely want to see him more, but they're also, they both work and
they have their things going
He's in
on.
daycare. Yeah. And so I would love to see him more. But he's the cutest and super precious.
Your kids, they just seem very well grounded, and Chase has seemed to have handled this very well, and I could tell he's very supportive of Reagan.
I mean, they're still brother and sister.
Oh yeah, they're still siblings.
I will say that I have worried about him a little bit, and I don't post as much or talk as much about him because it's different, and I get Reagan's permission and before I share anything. And so boys are different than girls and all the things. And so I do think I share more of Reagan
we don't like being
than him.
I don't post personal stuff.
Yeah, he doesn't. Yeah, he does. And so I want to respect that. But this year was hard for him. I mean, he took 5 AP classes.
Wow.
Like he took. See, I couldn't even, and that's the thing, I'm so disconnected with him, and so the parent...
Did he do any dual credit, or just AP?
No, he did all AP.
So he had AP English, AP U.S. History. I'm not a big fan of U.S. History, by the way. He probably took an AP Science.
AP Physics, yep.
Ooh, man.
I mean, I should know, but he just mostly handles all of his things. And then he had AP Computer Science because he was able to do computer science as his language other than English.
Mm-hmm.
Because of his STEM and math.
Did he take the AP exam for all those?
Yes.
The AP Physics, the AP Computer Science, AP Economics are 3 of the hardest AP exams you can take.
I mean, this was his hardest year.
Yeah, and AP Computer Science is hard to prep for.
Yeah. This was by far his hardest year, and it was probably the year that I was paying the least attention. So we always talk about mom guilt, and I'm sure he would be okay with me sharing this, but he has a 504 for ADHD.
Okay.
That he's the kid that won't use it.
I have kids that are like that.
So he will not turn in something because, the amount of school they miss for tennis and band, and then it's block scheduling. So trying to do the math of how many days.
We've had that.
So 3 days will go by, and he'll be like, I did not turn it in because of my ADHD. I didn't turn it in because I didn't do it. And I'm like, that's like, he just, and so this year was harder. And I think he was feeling a little down about it. I think just because he still made wonderful grades, but it's just not, it was his hardest year. 5 AP classes, varsity tennis, marching band. I'm I don't think you're going to have it's like 15 hours of college.
So that junior year, it should be easier for him this next year.
Oh yeah.
It'll be senior year it won't be a breeze, but it'll be a lot easier academically, and he'll be able to enjoy his last year in band and tennis a lot more.
Yeah.
Junior year's tough because you got state testing, and if you're in AP classes, you're not learning the same things that you're not being taught TEKS. and that's a whole issue. And I get it with the 504 because, you know, I have kids that have it. I have students that have it, and they don't want to use it. You know, if they have, you know, if they can go get help with a test or whatever, you know, voice to text, they will not use it. And I'm like, dude, you use it. Use it if you want to. And then when I see that they didn't do good, I tell them, like, you want to redo this with your, you know, whatever you need to do.
Yeah, and he did want to reach out, and so
some kids are embarrassed.
And their junior year, you know, that's like, I guess, the most important year academically. I mean, he's still going to be. Because
that's when your GPA gets established.
Okay.
Junior
I still
year,
think it's going to be great.
Junior year is your next hardest year.
He's going to be able to get into any school he wants to get to, but like trying to get him to, you know, speak up and advocate for himself for things like that. And even with Reagan was having a hard time advocating for herself at school. But what she has learned in medical situations because of this is how to advocate for herself in a medical situation, that she might even be better at that than in school. And what she's learned is, you know, that you're a kid, so you think if an adult does something, or if they turn your hand or whatever a certain way, you have to just like let them. And I'm like, no, this is your body. Like, you can say that hurts, stop doing that, I'm not okay with this. And so I think everything goes back to like advocating. It's like sometimes I'm like, it's education, and it's medical, and it's
hard to break those kids' cycles with, especially in education. You know, I appreciate when my students, because sometimes I do need a gentle reminder, like, hey coach, remember I get an extra day. And I have them type it on the Google form in the comment section so I'll remember it when I grade it, because I don't keep my attendance book. And, you know, I think it's important that kids advocate, not only for the grades, but if you have 504 and IEP, you know, you need to speak up. And you know, and my kids in my school seem to be a little bit, you know, shy about that, and they'll apologize. I'm like, don't apologize, because when you apologize, you're going to make me mad. Don't apologize. Just come and tell me and remind me. Or if I took off points and it was just a day late, please come and tell me so we can fix it. And then when I fix it, they're like he actually fixed it. Like they're shocked. And that's sad. That's sad that that's not the norm for kids. Their educational experience in public schools right now is not always, it's rarely positive, because.
But if you fit in a box, it works for you.
Yeah.
But there's fewer kids that are
I don't
fitting in a box.
Oh,
I mean, I didn't have any learning difficulties other than just being lazy.
I had a sweet student that I'll never forget. He got moved into my class mid-year, and being in education, if your kids move mid-year in elementary school, that's a big deal.
That's a big deal.
And so, and I will never forget him. And like within 30 seconds of him coming in my classroom, he's like, yeah, so I got moved into your class because so-and-so wouldn't follow my 504, and they said that you would. And I was like, and I absolutely will.
But what have I told you?
I thought we were going to end on a good note.
I'm sorry. We'll find a good note.
But I've told Ashley and Terry the very same thing. You would be shocked.
But that sweet kid was just, and I'm like, good for you for speaking up. And if anybody, and I would tell him, and I'm like, teachers are human. We forget. Like, if there's something, like, speak up and say something like that. Anyways, but I will never forget that
I'm
kid.
starting to think that kids aren't speaking up because they don't think that the adults are going to do anything about it.
That's a lot. That's
I think
some
there's
of it.
I think
there's a certain level of truth to that.
Or something. So I think
some of them don't speak up because
the more we talk about this stuff, I think the better it's going to be.
Some of them don't speak up because they don't want to be identified as that, but the other ones don't say anything because, well, they're not going to do it anyway.
Yeah, right. And in times where Reagan, I wanted her to find her voice in Grove terms, it was an intimidation thing. Like, I feel like you have to have a certain comfort level. And if you don't feel comfortable, I mean, even as adults, like hard conversations are hard. So we've talked a lot about we have to have hard conversations. And so for an 8 or a 9-year-old, you have to teach them how to have those hard conversations, whether it's with the teacher or somebody else. And so,
you have to.
And so if it's a teacher that like they're intimidated by, and teachers are tired and wore out, and they're not, again, this is not a teacher bashing thing. Teachers need to be more supported across the board. And so it's just the perfect storm of these kids that are struggling more with learning, with the school districts getting less funding, with teachers not getting the proper support they need. It's just like this perfect storm of.
And not being trained. We that's one of my big things is, you know, when you breeze over SPED, how do you access accommodations?
Yeah.
How do you access their IEP when they're on Aware now, when they're online? And I'm fine with that. I wish we had eSped at my school district, because eSped is a one-stop shop for everything. But how do you access it? And then more importantly, if you're a brand new teacher to the profession, or you're 2 or 3 years in, how do you adjust your lessons for those students? Yeah, how do you differentiate? And I'm not a big fan of that word, differentiate.
Right. Sorry. I'm education buzzword.
Well, yeah, it's one of those words. Right. I mean, and I think it's probably easier at the middle school level as opposed to the high school level. You know, I teach AP, but I still have kids in my classroom that are 504 and have IEPs. And so, do I change how I instruct them? No. We watch a video, we do notes, we do writing assignments. Now, the way we do those things is different. You know, if I have a student that requires a copy of the notes, I will share the slideshow with them. Whenever we're watching video, I'll put the closed captioning on. When we're doing writing assignments, I'll sit down and help them write their thesis statement or whatever the case would be. So that's how I go in and modify how they're doing it and give them bullet points on what they need to do to kind of help lead them and direct them where they need to go. And I'll do that with all my students. Yeah. Because I've learned that they need that. And so it's tough, because I mean, I don't know what it's like at the elementary level. I would never want to teach those age kids.
Well, the whole phrase,
it's overwhelming.
You can't pour from an empty cup. Again, there's amazing educators out there, more good than bad by far.
Oh, yeah.
But they have empty cups. They don't have the support they need. And when you have a class of 25, 30 kids that their reading levels range by like 3 years, and you have behaviors that interrupt the flow of the class and keep the rest of the class from being able to learn, like, it's just a support thing that goes back to
it's like
the state of education.
It's just like trying to survive. It's like I've said before, it's like an Animal Farm, the Lord of the Flies or something like that. And, you know, for me, this has been the least stressful year I've had. I told several people at our end of year meeting in the library, people just looked beat down. I mean, they just looked like they had gone through just like Full Metal Jacket, but the soap and the towel type thing. And they're like, folks, how come you look fresh? What's up with you? You don't look stressed at all. And they legitimately asked me, and I was like, do you really want to know? And they're like, yeah, what's your secret? I was like, you may not like this answer. And they're like, what's your secret? Do you drink a lot? Or I was like, no. I said, God. Yeah. It's a real simple solution, man. You just give it all to Him and let Him take care of it. And it's a whole lot easier to come to work and not be stressed. I worry about what happens in B305, and that's all I worry about. Yeah. And people are looking at me like.
But it gives you such a sense of peace, and that's what I kept going back to with just the focusing on your family and focusing on yourself. It really does, like, if that's where your compass is pointed to, everything else falls in line. And it's easier said than done, but that's been a huge thing for our family. It just reset our compass and what the main goal is. And I honestly, without my faith, I don't know how we would have gotten through what we did with Reagan. I mean, again, I still remember that MRI, that 45 minutes. I prayed the entire 45 minutes. Like, I just don't know how we could have gotten through it without our faith. It's definitely stronger on this side, and that takes me back to always trying to find, like, the purpose and the positive and the struggle and the suffering. And I would take all of that away for Reagan in a heartbeat, but all 4 of us are better and stronger across the board because of what she went through. Now, she still has a ways to go, but we're just different in a good way.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to wrap this up and just, people, if you're out there struggling with things, I mean, this has been a big struggle for y'all, and I feel blessed to have been able to kind of tag along on y'all's Facebook and to witness this and see see where you guys are at now, and I know, the connections you've made at Connection Church and getting back in faith. And I would just challenge people that if you're struggling with things, man, find you a good church home and find you a good group of believers and some wise counsel, and reach out to them. And if you can't find people, then reach out to us.
Yeah.
We know people. We're all jacked up in our own special way.
I was about to say, and
we are not perfect.
I mess up.
We
all
mess
the
up
time.
all the time, and man, that's the great thing about God and Jesus is that He loves us He loves us regardless, and He paid the price for us. And so, Amy, I sure do appreciate you coming in. I know it's a little late, but I think it's important to get your story out. Yeah.
No, I appreciate the opportunity for sure.
I think Daryl just wanted to get the record again.
For longest podcast?
You win again.
Yeah, yes.